Welcome back, Webtoon fam. Zaiden on deck. Let's kick off our epic pulse-pounding saga. We want to be top tier, so drop those likes, comments, everything as it should be. And now let's roll. So basically this ain't your standard teenage story, this one hits different. When Ban Yu-won was just 4 years old, he was already sitting there reading books in the original language, no sweat at all. Parents were shook, like proud, but also low-key confused, like is this even normal where this kid got all these languages in his head? Grandpa was a whole different character, walking around preaching that finally the chosen one was born, the one who will bring back the Tower of Babylon to their family. Parents thought he lost it for real, but he stood his ground, telling stories about how back in ancient times their ancestor Ban had a straight-up cheat ability to understand and translate any language, and because of that, people could actually understand each other and built that very tower, but now nobody knows where it is. But the moment the family finds it, they become top tier again, power, fame, everything, and Grandpa truly believed Yu-won with his talent would pull it off. But it turned out even crazier than expected. When the guy became an applicant, he had zero doubt he would get into some top university. But the me is my god or is fading here. Responses kept dragging and dragging, and then suddenly his computer starts lagging, screen goes blue, and some scuffed letter pops up in a language he does not even recognize. And turns out he got accepted, but not into a normal university, but into some best academy in an alternate reality, and a timer starts counting down to a transfer for a practical test. At the same time, a normal acceptance letter to a human university is just sitting on his laptop, but Yu-won does not even get a chance to celebrate properly, just bam, and he disappears from the room like he got cut out of reality and gets transferred to some unknown place where the task is super chill: kill a blind goblin and destroy the dungeon core. He just stands there completely lost, not understanding what is going on because he never even applied anywhere. And then in front of him, a massive goblin with a club shows up, clearly ready to turn him into dinner, and there are not many options, either him or the goblin. Everything feels like a game, but the pain, fear, and everything else is way too real, and he has to do something even though he has zero ideas. The goblin smashes the ground with full force. Good thing they are blind and cannot see him. No time to panic, he starts dodging, realizes these creatures track by sound and movement, but he will not last long like this. And then his brain finally kicks in, he decides to use them against themselves, starts making noise, distracting, throws a stone at one, mimics their sounds so they get confused and start beating each other up, basically taking themselves out. Yu-won picks up the club, stands there for a second, hesitating like should he finish it or not, but realizes if he messes up now he is done for. And in the end he goes for it and finishes the monster, and then he gets wrapped in golden light. The system congratulates him on his first hunt and as a reward gives him some power from a higher dimension. And along with that, the Babylon Codex opens up, and now things are getting really interesting about what is coming next. Now his power gets transmitted through some kind of ideograms of his language, and this is no longer just knowing languages, this is basically a cheat code. He is literally pulling concepts out of enemies like he is looting abilities. You stash it for later, you use it right away. Without overthinking it, he absorbs the goblin upgrades and becomes noticeably tougher: grip, stronger legs, more powerful skin, denser full-on boost. And the goblins themselves just disappear after that like they got erased from the game, leaving behind only 2 clubs as a reminder. Yu-won quickly figures if this whole concept thing really works, then getting out of the dungeon is just a matter of technique. And without wasting time, he clears the place real quick. The practical test, yeah, he passes it, but instead of going home, he gets thrown into some random world, the United Academy. He appears in a room system, tells him to change clothes and go to an interview. Yeah, sure, first almost got killed, now interview makes perfect sense. Yu-won was already ready to say everything on his mind, and at least get some kind of moral compensation, but in the office he is greeted by a very pretty girl with green skin, probably an alien but beautiful. This is Yumina, professor of magical combat. She calmly congratulates him on the exam, and casually mentions that the entire faculty was actually watching him, because he is the first in 500 years who created a new artifact right during the test. And of course nobody cares that he got dragged here without consent, they have their own way of thinking here. Yu-won already wanted to dip from this weird place right after the talk, but then he notices a massive pillar outside the window. Turns out everything revolves around it. The academy gathers talented people from different worlds so they can reach the top of the tower. That is their mission and basically the last hope of all dimensions. The tower, by the way, is that same Babylon tower his grandpa was always talking about. Yu-won quickly connects the dots: monsters, chaos, legends, everything lines up. And then it clicks for him, he is going to restore his family glory. Decision made, he enrolls. Thanks to special treatment from Yamuna, he even gets allowed to go home to prepare. He gathers his family, tells them everything, and starts intense preparation. Now he is not just a language genius, but a full-on monster hunter. The Babylon Codex gives him the ability to transform, absorb, and control concepts of basically anything, defeat an enemy, take its essence, get stronger. He even embeds a concept from the first dungeon into that same club and upgrades it into a mace with a secret form that unlocks on command. On one of the evaluations, this gives him a solid result. Then among the acquired concepts, a new one appears: soul. He keeps feeding the mace with various minor concepts and eventually something completely beyond happens. Transcendental fusion, and in front of him appears a silver snake, beautiful calm. He carefully reaches out to pet it, and surprisingly it is affectionate. He names her Eva. Then he decides to check the stats. Life is like level, flesh is physical power, the rest seems tied to his language abilities. He hits return and a portal pulls him back. Now he is already in a lecture hall at the entrance ceremony. Everything around feels like some surreal game. A bunch of people, weird atmosphere. He activates his all-seeing eyes and realizes he got in through a special admission for lower dimensions, while the regular students who passed standard selection look actually powerful. While he is trying to find his seat, some big guy tells him to just disappear, saying if you are lower level, do not stand out. Typical snob energy. At the end of the hall, there are separate seats for people like him, 4 chairs standing apart, almost like an exile zone. He looks at the other 3 through his eyes and just freezes. These guys are so strong that if they wanted, they could wipe the floor with all those elite students who are thinking way too highly of themselves right now. Yu-Won, looking at those separate seats for the special ones, throws in with irony that they look like elite stuck on the outskirts. And a slight is a whole different story. The guy literally shines like some fairy tale prince. This is the same roommate Yu-Won met in the dorm, and their first meeting was, let's just say, pretty intense. A slight straight up pointed a sword at him without any small talk. Yu-Won, in panic, started explaining that he is actually supposed to live here. Turns out the prince was just on edge after the selection, but to his credit, he apologized first. Though right after that, he dropped that even a newbie could handle a blind goblin. Yeah, thanks, very supportive. Yu-Won felt kinda awkward from that kind of compliment and just went to take a shower. And right there, when a slight accidentally saw his physique, his jaw literally dropped. The guy blushed, got flustered, mumbled something about coming back later, and left. And that weird, awkward tension between them is still hanging in the air. Then Yu-Won decides to distract himself and goes to meet 2 girls nearby. One has pink hair, basically walking cuteness. The other is her complete opposite, calm, mysterious, with completely black eyes. And she got interested in the snake wrapped around Yu-Won's arm. He actually thought nobody could see Eva. The girls immediately recognized the artifact he created during the test. The one with black eyes introduced herself as Dokokeon, daughter of a marine master. They have their own thing, with martial arts creating wind pressure between their palms. And the cutie is named Rochelle, and honestly the name fits her perfectly. They barely get to talk when everything suddenly gets interrupted. The ceremony begins. Yu-Won and a slight are still discussing their interview with Yumina when the ceiling of the hall just starts opening. And suddenly everyone gets hit with pressure, like a couple tons just dropped on their shoulders. People grab their heads. In the sky above the building, something massive appears, and it announces the start of the 2,500-something opening ceremony. Later, Yumina asked the students about their impressions. It was a gigantic eye in the sky, and that is actually the rector. Most students did not even dare to lift their heads out of fear. The creature apparently hides its true form in some special way, and seeing it again is a privilege for those who actually achieve something. But it seems Yu-Won got lucky, or maybe not. Yumina announces that she will be their curator. Usually students get someone simpler, but this year the lineup is wild, so they brought in heavy artillery right away. She teaches magical combat, and immediately advises to be ready for jealousy and aggression from regular students. This is no longer just about who scores better on exams, this is real fights and conflicts. The 4 special ones are now a team that will climb the tower until graduation, and the academy gives them gifts. Yumina opens a box, golden light pours out, and each of them gets a pendant, their student ID. With it they can confirm identity, access campus facilities, and even teleport around the territory. But there is a catch: if you want to enter the tower, the pendant must be with you. You gotta guard it like your life depends on it. When everyone is about to leave, suddenly only Yu-Won remains. Probably because he is the only one who looked at the rector. And now the stress kicks in. First day at the academy and he is already being called for a personal meeting. He hopes he did not mess anything up. The rector calmly says there is no need to be afraid, and that he can look straight at him since his real body is not here. Yu-Won raises his eyes, and instead of some cosmic monster, he sees a small rag doll right in front of him. The rector is actually a pretty detached type. He does not get involved in teaching, does not save students, and does not care whether they survive the tower or turn into monster food. He has one goal: to see the absolute madman who will actually reach the top. But for Yu-Won, this is already personal, and he is ready to put even his life on the line. Then it suddenly hits him: why did everyone else even come here? What are they climbing this tower for? He straight up asks what this place even is, and the rector answers that the tower is a trial on the path to something divine. Not like becoming a pharaoh or Jesus, but something way more serious. And then out of nowhere, the rector makes an exception. Yu-Won has so much potential it would be a sin not to experiment. He expands his permissions and now the guy can freely roam dungeons even outside the academy. That's it, conversation over. As a final note, the rector tells him to level up before entering the tower, and if U1 shows results, the next privilege unlocks a solo run of the tower. And literally right after that, he gets sucked into a portal like the interview just ended and you got kicked out of a Zoom call. He drops straight into Yumina's arms, who casually asks about the conversation like nothing happened. Turns out the rector always says goodbye like that. U1 retells everything and Yumina's eyes almost pop out. Students almost never get permissions like this. Now he can explore external dungeons, visit cities, and basically level up way faster than everyone else. And he thought he just got sent to extra classes because he was weak. Yumina is even a bit jealous teachers barely leave the academy because everything here is designed for students, not for their comfort. Then she asks him for a favor. She suggests visiting Ranika, a solid external city, and grabbing one thing there, a newlyweds wine made by temple priests. Says the taste is unreal. So yeah, a professor just sent a student to fetch an elite bottle. U1 decides that honestly this is a small price for such bonuses and remembers the gift from his grandpa that he got during a short visit home. Now he has a bag with expanded inventory and inside there are golden scrolls shining like they are begging to be spent. This is the legacy of his ancestors who devoted themselves to the Tower of Babylon. Now all of it is his starting capital. Grandpa also said that gold is valued everywhere, so U1 without hesitation grabs a couple of bars. Getting ready, he steps forward and enters a new world. In front of him opens a futuristic city. Looks like another dimension but feels suspiciously familiar, until he notices flying cars. Guards of Ronica call out to him, but once they see the uniform of the United Academy, their tone instantly changes. Respect, greetings, everything as it should be. They say that thanks to the efforts of the rector and the academy, the cities remain safe, and if anything, they are ready to help. And right there, U1 points at the sky at one of the flying rides and asks for the price. The guards just freeze. U1 hops onto his new ride and cruises off feeling good, leaving the guards just standing there stunned. Because even the most basic hoverbike costs around 250,000 roni, and this guy just pulled out a massive gold bar like it was pocket change. And that bar, by the way, is worth about 7.5 million. Grandpa really invested in his grandson, no joke. But U1 did not stop there. He added a spirit and a ghost into the bike, turning it into a living artifact. Now it is not just transport, it is basically a partner, and her name is Lilith. During that time, he grabbed the wine for Yumina, made a little sister for Eva on the side, and decided it was time to head back to the academy. The return, though, was not exactly triumphant. His head was pounding like crazy. First, U1 just vanished after their talk, and now he comes back with a hangover. Yumina insisted, saying no would have been way too awkward. And now U1 has a class leader badge on his chest, which he basically got for drinking with a professor. Yumina said it so that is final, U1 is the leader, period. But of course no way it goes without conflict. Dokuyan says she should be the leader because she is the strongest here. A Slight makes a face and says that is a weird way to think since they are a team and should be equal. Even though he himself recently asked if he could conquer the tower solo. Dokuyan just smirks, and it is obvious the tension in the team is already off the charts. U1 was about to suggest some plan but quickly realized this is not just a team, this is a collection of walking problems. Now it is clear why Yumina dumped the leader role on him. A Slight seems fine but naive with pride blown way too high. Dokuyan is powerful but extremely self-centered. Rushel is cute but way too passive. In the end, U1 takes initiative and asks everyone to calm down. He explains that a leader is not supposed to be the strongest, otherwise, that is not a leader but a solo player dragging everyone without caring about their opinion. A leader should make decisions that work for everyone. Dogoyon surprisingly agrees, well, almost. In reality, she only cares about U1, the rest she sees as dead weight. And if she wants to stay near him, she will have to tolerate the extras. No need to even clarify who she meant. The morning was intense to say the least. U1 convinces himself it is just a matter of time they will get used to each other. Although at that very moment, Rushel is already asking for permission to pet Eva. The first day as a leader starts pretty chill. They are taken to a massive arena, along with the rest of the students. The professor suggests starting with a light sparring session, but it only sounds light. The regular students are literally burning with desire to fight the special class. And as expected, the first special class already hates the 11th with a passion. Fuel gets added to the fire because U1 has Yumina's brooch on his chest, and she is basically like a goddess of flowers here. And of course that one guy shows up. A huge brute named Erecto, who is practically tearing his clothes apart from wanting to fight U1. The atmosphere heats up, everyone is waiting for the show, and then the professor calmly calls U1 into the arena. Yumina is honestly confused, like what kind of nonsense is this? Why is the very first lesson basically a real fight? She clearly understands that a student from a lower dimension physically cannot handle a sparring match against someone from a higher one, and the whole situation smells like some shady setup. And now Yu-Won is already being called to the arena, but he surprisingly stays calm and says that his combat skills are still rough and in a fight like this he would not learn anything. Sounds reasonable, but the professor just takes away 3 points and still sends him in. At this point it really starts to look like a public humiliation in front of the entire academy. Yu-Won was not accepted for throwing hands but for his unique abilities, so it would make more sense to evaluate those instead of putting on a circus fight. The assistant professor is boiling from that kind of boldness, but Yu-Won keeps going and offers an alternative. There is a preparation week coming up, so move the sparring to next week. He is confident that if he just goes to a higher dimension once and comes back, it will be enough to properly prepare. The hall instantly fills with noise, people start reacting, discussions everywhere. Some girl in a witch hat even gets curious about how he is planning to fight the special class later. The assistant is already on the verge of exploding, he just got cornered, but there is no way out, so he agrees. But the sparring will be broadcast across the whole academy. So yeah, this is not just a fight anymore, this is a show meant to publicly crush Yu-Won. Yu-Won just waves at Erecto and calmly says he is waiting for the match. The guy just snorts and walks away. Politeness is not his thing. If we are being real, Erecto's stats are insane. His life and flesh are several times, if not 10 times higher than Yu-Won. But even with that, if you compare Yu-Won to a Slight and Rochelle, he still looks weaker for now. And if he plans to climb the tower with them, he needs to at least reach someone like Erecto. After all this, a Slight and Rochelle quietly leave, but Dakoyan does the opposite and openly starts flexing her combat skills. She genuinely does not understand how anyone would not want to test their strength against other special selection students. By the way, all her skills are S-class and above, and she is more than ready to spar right now. The hall goes silent. Even Yu-Won's all-seeing eyes cannot fully read her level. The pressure coming from her is insane. Then she suddenly turns to Erecto, saying he is not the type to back down, so he should step up and show everyone what he is worth. And now it gets really awkward, he clearly did not expect that. Everyone understands if he accepts and fights her, that is the end for him. Yu-Won, even though this does not directly concern him, steps in and slows Dakoyan down. He suggests she wait for her turn because Erecto is his opponent. He needs to prove his strength with his own hands, not through someone else. Dokoyan looks at him and admits there is at least some courage in him, so fine. Then, without losing momentum, she throws a challenge to literally anyone. The answer: silence. Nobody rushes forward. She lets out a heavy sigh, flips her hair back, and with clear disappointment says that just a second ago everyone was barking so loud and now they are rooted to the ground. And then one guy finally snaps and asks her to repeat who exactly she called dogs. The weak and the stupid, according to her, always gather in packs, growl, and pretend they are protecting their tiny little worlds. And watching that, he actually enjoys it. Even compared to the special class, this guy looks like he is on a completely different level. This is Ortima, the ruler of the Cadius dimension, and the scale here really matters. Besides the United Academy, there are only 10 higher dimensions in existence, and he comes from a family that governs one of them. That means he is literally a representative of one of the top 10 dynasties across all dimensions. Meanwhile, the instructor is already pulling out a recording device. They are about to stream all of this and turn it into a clean show. And yeah, it is kind of funny that Yu-Won, being from a lower dimension, even knows what the internet is. People quickly find the stream, and now Dakoyan and Ortima are already on screen. The teacher is clearly expecting an awkward beating, or at least a tense show, but as usual, everything goes completely off script. Dakoyan, completely calm, lets Ortima make the first move. To him, that sounds like a straight-up insult. In response, he pushes not just with force, but with something that feels like reality itself being warped. The pressure crashes down on everyone around, like the air turned heavy and thick like water, dragging you down. Breathing becomes hard, the body itself feels like it wants to drop to its knees, like that is the only correct position. Rochelle, unable to handle it, grabs onto Yu-Won's arm while he keeps watching without blinking. And in the middle of all that pressure, Dakoyan just stands there. No shaking, no bending, she stands and answers with her own power. Without extra movement, she raises her energy and literally shuts down his pressure, like turning off someone else's light with her own. All that royal presence and overwhelming pressure just does not land the way he expects. But Ortima is not about to back down. He is clearly not used to being ignored or worse, suppressed. Only now everything starts falling apart. Dokoyan suddenly closes the distance and slams a hit straight into his chest, not giving him time to build up or amplify his attack. He tries to block, but in the next second he is already caught. She moves behind him so fast he cannot even react. His movements look heavy and stiff, like all his power is focused into pressure instead of actual combat. He is used to winning by crushing opponents with his rewritten reality, but when that does not work, he gets lost. Dakoyan, on the other hand, moves light, precise, and without extra emotion, and starts dismantling him piece by piece, strikes coming one after another, and he cannot defend or counter. Ortima is strong but static, while Dakoyan is flexible, aggressive, and fully in control. A slight at this moment is completely shocked because Yu-won is not just watching, he is analyzing, absorbing everything. He is literally reading both of them, breaking down their strengths and weaknesses. And in the arena, something happens that does not fit any expectations. A representative of one of the strongest families is getting hit like this is just a casual spar with a beginner. At some point for Ortima, this stops being about the fight and turns into humiliation. Rage starts to take over. He gathers all his power into one burst, his eyes literally burning, and it becomes clear he is not holding back anymore. For him, this is no longer training or a display of status. This is a personal war he intends to finish at any cost. But then it becomes clear that all that talk about killing right now is way above Ortimus level, no matter how much he is boiling with rage. Both are already at the edge, their power about to collide, but right at that moment, Yumina steps in and calls it off. And then something almost magical happens. The entire arena in a single instant turns into a field covered in flowers. Turns out in the academy, fights to the death are not welcome for that. There is the tower where you can go full apocalypse if you want. And this is not just some pretty illusion, the scent is so rich it feels completely real. Everything appears and disappears just as instantly, like someone switched the scene. Ortima, clearly not done processing what just happened, just leaves in irritation while Dokoyon calmly acknowledges Yumina's strength and goes back to the group. Yuwon already starts enthusiastically breaking down the fight, saying how insane it was, but then Rochelle literally clings to his back. The girl is still shaking, she is genuinely scared of Dokoyon. Somewhere nearby, Yumina is already tearing into Instructor Pharrell for turning the first lesson into something that intense. He just stands there, head down like a school kid getting scolded. Then Yumina walks up to Yuwon, calmly taps his chest and points out that for a class leader, dignity is basic, and he is even wearing his badge upside down. And all of this happens at point-blank distance, so everyone around basically freezes from what they are seeing. After that, she just casually walks away, leaving even more tension behind. Meanwhile, the academy is going full chaos. Chats are exploding with discussions about the fight between Goyon and Ortima. Nobody expected students from a lower dimension to pop off like that, and now the full fight is out there online. People are losing their minds trying to figure out who that lucky guy was that Yumina talked to so closely. The group themselves already realize they have become local celebrities. Goyon, though, is not impressed. She does not even understand how Ortima can be considered the most promising, although she admits someone in his class is way more dangerous. Yu-won, by the way, did not even notice that girl in the hat. He was too focused on the fight. A slight, meanwhile, notices Rushel sitting apart and wonders if it is always like that between them. The girl is clearly afraid of Goyon, and it is hard to imagine how they even live together. Yu-won decides to lighten the mood a bit, and without overthinking it, creates a jam elixir. Not just some snack, but something that boosts stats, too. The others are shocked when he asks for bread, spreads the jam, and offers it to everyone. The taste is so unreal, their eyes literally light up. This is not food anymore. This is a whole new level of pleasure. Even Rushel, getting a bit braver, moves closer and takes her piece. The others almost start begging for more. And while everyone is enjoying the moment, Dokoyon suddenly jumps up like something clicked in her head. She makes a decision, walks over, and literally pulls Yu-won closer. If he is going to share things like that, then she is ready to personally train him in martial arts. The two of them move to a training room, spacious, quiet, with a strange sense of comfort and calm, like the space itself is pushing you to focus. Yu-won does not really understand what he is about to be taught, but Dokoyon, without wasting words, takes a wooden sword and tells him not to make any sudden moves. And in the very next second, the tip is already right in front of his face. A pure thrust executed without the slightest hesitation, like it is not a person but a perfectly tuned mechanism. And in that exact brief moment, Yu-won catches a new concept, piercing. It throws him off a bit because it feels more like something from swordsmanship. Dokoyon quickly brings him back. A thrust on its own does not exist, it is always part of something bigger. It can be an ending, it can be a beginning, it can be hidden inside another technique. What matters is not just to stab, but to understand where the strike comes from, how often you use it, what you imitate, and most importantly, what intention you put into it. The variations are endless, but the foundation is always one simple, clean thrust. And in her execution, it feels not like a technique, but like the essence itself. Not a set of moves, but one idea pushed to absolute perfection. Yu-won tries to repeat it. He knows it will be a poor imitation, but still steps forward. Goyon is sure from the start that her level cannot be copied just like that, and then something unexpected happens. He actually grasps the foundation in one try. Not perfectly, not completely, but the principle, yes. Until now, he always played by stacking more concepts to get stronger, combining layering, boosting through quantity. And now it suddenly clicks, power also comes from depth. If you bring one thing to perfection, it can be stronger than 10 mixed together. Out of all possible interpretations of a thrust, he locks onto piercing. Because for Dakoyan, it is not just a movement, it is the intention to definitely reach the target. Not to touch, not to test, but to break through. One precise lethal vector. And at some point, he starts getting too carried away. Dakoyan stops him there. Is no point breaking yourself at the start. Things like this are trained in real combat. But even in that short time, something crazy happens. Yu-1 notices his stats rising just from a few attempts. The concept of piercing is already at level 16 even though he just learned about it. Swordsmanship, which never grew no matter how many goblins he cut, suddenly moves forward. And his combat stats almost double. Even Dokoyan did not expect to see someone grasp the very essence of a technique at first glance, especially with a training sword. Yu-1 literally feels the depth of her movements like he looked inside the technique itself. He never even thought someone could reach that level of mastery, and for a moment he completely loses track of time, fully immersed in the process. When he says it out loud, Dokoyan unexpectedly gets embarrassed. You can clearly see those direct words throw her off a bit. He leaves her his elixir as thanks, but understands it is not even close to an equal exchange. She just brushes it off, saying he will make up for it later. They return back, and from the outside no one would guess Dogoyan even has such a soft side. Meanwhile, Rushel is calmly walking down the corridor to class. Suddenly a group of guys blocks her path, and one of them, the most arrogant one, immediately starts picking on her. But just as the situation was about to slide into something ugly, a slight steps in between them and decides to figure out what is going on. That guy immediately tries to pressure him, going for the usual move of putting down someone from a lower dimension. But right then Yu-1 and Dokoyan walk up. The atmosphere shifts instantly. He just snorts, throws something like "watch where you are going" and backs off. After that, it is what looks like a normal lesson on the history of the Union. But the same group in the back does not calm down. They start taking pictures of Rushel throwing nasty comments. It is loud enough for the whole room, and Rushel literally shrinks from the embarrassment. And the weirdest part, the teacher acts like none of it is happening. At some point, a slight cannot take it anymore, stands up and asks the teacher to do something about those very active listeners. In response, just a dry remark, and the lecture continues like nothing is going on. The back row only gets more fired up. Now they switch to a slight himself, commenting on his looks, making dumb jokes, throwing in stupid guesses about him and Rushel. The atmosphere turns straight up toxic. A slight is already on edge. You can see him shaking with anger, but Yu-1 calmly stops him, making it clear that stepping into this mess is not the best move. Instead, he just shows him his phone screen. And this is where it gets interesting. The whole lecture is already live. Yeah, he started the stream, and nobody even noticed thanks to Eva keeping it hidden. And now all those back row heroes suddenly become content for the entire academy. Their words, behavior, comments, everything is out there. Online, the reaction explodes instantly, and those guys get completely torn apart. When they realize what is happening, panic kicks in. They start pointing, shouting, trying to fix it, but it is way too late. And that is when the teacher finally snaps and without any ceremony throws them out of the room, promising them special treatment for the rest of the year. Rushel quietly thanks the group. Yu-1, as usual, does not make a big deal out of it. He just did what he could and it worked. But for Rushel, the fact that he is the leader and keeps things under control already gives her a sense of safety. It feels like things can finally calm down, but not really. At the practical lesson, the same group shows up again, this time with a clear intention to settle things. After yesterday's stream, that same group basically got their semester scores wiped out and their classmates started avoiding them. But instead of laying low, 3 of them decide to go all in. Right during class, they pull out weapons and point them at Yu-1 and his friends. And the most absurd part, the teachers act like this, is nothing serious. The main pressure once again falls on a slight. The guys keep provoking him, but he stays calm and cold, making it clear that if they want to be heard, they should first learn how to speak properly. In response, one of them brings a sword right up to his throat. And right here, everything changes in a split second. The aggressor's sword just flies out of his hands somewhere to the far end of the arena, and in Oslight's hands appears his own weapon glowing with golden light. The next moment, he is the one holding a blade to the opponent's throat, completely taking control of the situation. As Light's behavior shifts sharply, like he became a completely different person. Maybe the reason is that artifact, the sword itself, radiates powerful concepts that affect not only strength but also the state of its owner. The group instantly loses all their confidence. Under that pressure, they can barely even move. A slight calmly steps back, but before that asks the teacher what kind of grade students get for attacking classmates with real weapons during class. Formally, the academy allows sparring, but in this case there was no consent. A slight simply reacted to a direct threat. The teacher clearly tries to paint him as the one at fault, ignoring all the previous insults and provocations. A slight draws his sword again, and now its power shows even stronger. The light literally cuts the eyes, and the pressure feels physical. Dogoyan steps in. One quick flick to his forehead, and a slight instantly snaps back to normal. She firmly puts him in his place, pointing out that getting arrogant just because of a strong weapon leads nowhere. After that, he puts the sword back into his inventory, and the teacher is left with nothing but irritation, still seeing everything as arrogance from lower dimensions. Later during lunch, Yu-Won says directly that if things keep going like this, they will never get normal treatment in the academy. A slight admits he tried to repeat Yu-Won's success and improve the situation but almost made everything worse instead. The sudden change in his behavior remains especially strange. And once again, everything points to that sword. Yu-Won suggests that a slight is still capable of controlling this power, otherwise he would never have passed the entrance tests. A slight confirms it and explains that he lost his balance because of the teacher's behavior. He promises not to cause more trouble. Dokgoyen, on the other hand, even found it amusing how a divine artifact can suppress its own owner. She starts to better understand what Professor Yumina meant. If things keep going like this, their student life will be anything but calm. And if Yu-Won already has some understanding of what comes next and what they should do, this is the perfect time to say it out loud. Over the past few days, Yu-Won finally figured out where all this tension is coming from. Most students here build their mindset around power and innate superiority, and the contempt toward people from lower dimensions is so deeply rooted that it feels completely normal to them. In an environment like that, outsiders have almost no chance of gaining recognition through usual means. So what do you actually need to be accepted by a large group? Not words and not even strength, because they already have plenty of that. The key is image, how others see you. He suggests creating a channel where they show their daily life, slowly building a recognizable presence that will attract attention and eventually turn into respect. It is not an instant fix but a strategic move. A slight at first does not get why any of this matters, especially when another sparring session comes up, but Yu-Won insists they take it seriously. In the end, a slight and Dokgoyen start training, which quickly turns into a demonstration. She casually throws him over her shoulder again and again, even teasing his reliance on the artifact. The gap in their levels is obvious. Meanwhile, Yu-Won is filming everything. These are exactly the moments he needs. Russell still does not fully understand how this is supposed to help, but Yu-Won explains that the effect will not be immediate. But if the people who used to bully them had known in advance who they were dealing with, they probably would not have dared. He suggests not rushing conclusions and just continuing. Especially since Russell herself, her appearance and genuine emotions naturally draw attention. She just needs to relax a bit and allow herself to be who she is. The filming goes on from training to everyday scenes like Russell almost in tears trying to deal with soup overloaded with cilantro, and the results come fast. The 11th class launches a channel called Uprising, and it literally blows up with audience interest. Their fights look spectacular even to higher beings. Simple things like board games become something new for many, and Russell quickly turns into a fan favorite. Already the next day, a live stream of their tower climb is announced, and within just a day the channel gains over 1,000 subscribers. In a world where miracles are normal, nobody really thought about turning them into content, but Yu-Won managed to present it in a way that even the ordinary feels fresh and exciting. The day of entering the tower arrives. Almost everyone prepares in their own way, putting on their best gear, but in the end everyone sticks to their own style. Yu-Won does not even have special combat equipment. He never needed it back on Earth. Still, he calmly chooses the academy uniform, considering it enough. The team steps onto the portal and gets transferred to the tower. They are recognized immediately. They stand at the main entrance where access depends on your level of preparation, and they become the first freshmen allowed to enter. Even that same group that used to mock them now looks at them differently. But there is another gaze far more dangerous. Among the observers is the giant Erecto, clearly hostile. In 4 days a duel is scheduled and there is barely any time to prepare. Yu-Won is already planning ahead. Within this short time he intends to reach a level where getting close to him will be impossible. Yumina, understanding how serious this is, suggests finishing everything as quickly as possible for safety. Yu-Won confidently sets the time frame: 2 nights and 3 days. That is enough to handle it and return in time. The professor accepts his answer and wishes them luck. The team heads toward the entrance of the tower, and ahead of them lies a completely different level of trials. Even before entering the tower, Yu-Won managed to discuss filming inside with Yumina. Specjalna pod eta. He created a new artifact built on a principle similar to Ava and Lilith. The structure of the tower is constantly shifting, and each level here is called a room. After clearing it, destroying all monsters and dealing with traps, the space itself shifts, moving the team forward. The more shifts like that, the deeper they go. There is no way back. Returning to a previous room is impossible. At the same time, each new room becomes harder than the last, stronger enemies, more dangerous traps. Dokgoyen brings up the most obvious but also the most important question. What happens if someone dies? The others caught up in the process really overlooked that part. But it turns out that in most zones of the tower, death is not final. You just get thrown back to the entrance. This is where the student pendant comes into play. It records your progress. Because of that, when you re-enter, you can continue from the same point where you stopped. That is why this artifact is absolutely essential for clearing the tower. But of course there is always a catch. This rule does not work everywhere. There are special zones where death is real and irreversible. After clearing that up, the team gets to work. In the first room they encounter Claw Scyther's creatures that can consume the opponent's equipment. For their level this is not a serious problem. The fight goes quickly and without much pressure. However, Yu-1 notices something strange. His concept of fire is clearly there, he can feel it, but extracting or fully using it does not work. In dungeons it was never like this, everything worked normally. Maybe the very nature of the tower is affecting his abilities, and understanding this might become the key to his future growth. He even tries to extinguish a torch flame but fails. Dokoyan was hoping Yu-1 would be able to use the specific traits of each room to their advantage. At that moment, a Claw Scyther almost jumps her from behind, but Yu-1 reacts instantly. His chain disperses the green slime. At the same time, his artifacts behave almost on their own. Ava keeps attacking without any command. Yu-1 does have stronger artifacts, but they are too loud for the current situation. Rushel, unlike the others, acts more on instinct. Her style does not fit the careful stealth approach usually required in dungeons, but she compensates it with speed and decisiveness. In the first room, everything goes smoothly, and it even starts to feel like there will be no problems. But the moment a Slight says it out loud, the space reacts, energy gathers in the air, signaling the arrival of a more serious opponent. Everyone instinctively expects Yu-1 to use his perception. Ahead, an obelisk appears. Rushel does not hesitate for even a second. She dashes forward and destroys the obelisk before the elite monster can fully manifest. Along with that, a strengthened core drops. She grabs the sphere, but at that same moment her hair begins to darken. At that moment, a new concept literally manifests above Rushel, something like a forge tied to the heart. It looks like a furnace where emotions are used as fuel. Those emotions burn, turning into raw power. Basically, it is a berserker-type state, powerful but potentially dangerous. Now everything that happened before starts to make sense. Her sudden bursts of strength, the strange changes, none of it was random. Rushel, still not fully understanding what is happening, clings to Yu-1. He does not hesitate and tells her she looked reliable, rather than scary. Dokoyon reacts much harsher. This kind of dependence and uncertainty irritates her. She makes it clear that if Rushel loses control, she will eliminate the threat without hesitation. Moreover, she would rather travel with Yu-1 alone. Still, Yu-1 is already thinking ahead on how to stabilize the situation. He needs not only to calm Rushel down, but also make sure her power does not become a problem for the whole team. The team moves forward and enters the second room. At first glance, it barely differs from the previous one except for moss and weeds on the ground. But Yu-1 holding the elite monster core makes an important discovery. The efficiency of gaining concepts here is many times higher. In one room he gets as much as he used to grind from dozens of repeated goblin dungeon runs. His previous efforts now feel almost useless compared to what the tower offers. Among the new concepts he highlights acid and fusion properties that allow destruction and dissolution. He immediately enhances his sword with fusion and gives acid to Ava, making her attacks even more dangerous. Doc Goyan, as usual, appears next to him out of nowhere, making him flinch. At the same time, a Slight reminds everyone not to relax, the monsters will show up soon. And right on cue, evil spirits start forming in front of them. At first, the second room does not seem harder than the first, but that feeling is deceptive. A Slight advises to stay alert, but Doc Goyan suggests a different approach. Let Yu-1 clear the room himself. He needs to unlock his potential as fast as possible, especially with the upcoming fight. Yu-1 agrees. Spending the whole team's energy here is inefficient if his growth can be accelerated instead. He gathers energy and activates Ava, transforming her into something like a machine gun from the real world. A stream of metallic projectiles rains down on the enemies, and the speed at which they are wiped out is truly impressive. A Slight cannot hide his surprise. This kind of weapon looks extremely effective even in a world dominated by martial arts. However, the attacks are too straightforward. They work perfectly at range, but in tight spaces this can turn against him. And right in that moment, the weakness shows. While Yu-1 is focused on the barrage, a threat appears in his blind spot. The others barely have time to react. Massive jaws are already hanging right above his head. But right then, Yu-1 draws his sword, and with one precise motion cuts the monster in half. A Slight and Rushel clearly did not expect that level of blade control from him. It looked way too confident for someone who supposedly does not specialize in swords. In reality, he is still behind them in raw power and technique, but the difference is in how fast he learns. Yu-1 does not just learn, he does it with a terrifying efficiency, instantly integrating new skills into actual combat. After a short time, he almost completely clears the room. Only one enemy remains, and after that the next shift will happen. Realizing this, he suggests taking a short pause before moving on. The remains of defeated monsters begin to melt and dissolve right in front of them, and Yu-1 is already using techniques he picked up just minutes ago. considering he did not live a life of constant battles before. His progress looks even more unnatural. Goyeon cannot ignore that. She even admits that his last strike was genuinely good, though she immediately adds that he should not get fixated only on fast sword attacks. But in her opinion, it is still better than being a fighter who just swings a blade without understanding the essence. Meanwhile, Yu-won casually pulls out a can of soda and opens it. The others look at him like he just brought something from a completely different world. You can buy things like that in the city, but for them it is a rare luxury. Realizing this, he quietly puts the can back into his inventory. Daka-yeon, slightly annoyed that he gets to enjoy things like that alone, decides to take the next room on herself. After a short break, the team continues forward. Yu-won uses the pause to analyze his stats. His current level already matches the academy average, and that is with very little time spent here. Swordsmanship and piercing, which he only recently started learning, have already grown significantly. With this rate of development, it makes sense to focus specifically on combat technique. After all, the outcome of the upcoming spar depends directly on that. However, the gap between him and Erecto is still massive, over 200 points. Honestly, closing that distance in just a couple of days seems impossible. And yet, during his training with Goyeon, he picked up an important idea. It is not only about gaining new abilities, but also about perfecting the ones you already have. For a moment, he even considers going back to her for more training, but quickly drops the thought. Relying on Goyeon is not the best path. Yu-won calmly runs all of this through his mind, trying to build his own strategy for growth. But a sudden shout from a slight cuts his thoughts. He tells everyone to move immediately. And in the next second, the ground beneath them just disappears. The team suddenly loses support and starts falling into the unknown. The team suddenly starts falling straight toward a field of insanely sharp spears, and there is no time to think. Yu-won instantly activates Ava in chain form, hooks onto a support, grabs Rochelle, and literally hangs in the air holding both of them. The tension is unreal. One more second and it could have been over, but now a different question hits. Was this a planned tower mechanism, or did something go wrong because the room is way too large, clearly beyond normal difficulty for a third level? While he is trying to process it, Goyeon's voice comes from above shouting for him to get up immediately, or he is dead. And at that same moment, arrows start flying at him from all directions, but he cannot let go of Rochelle, so he deflects attacks with the chain while pulling her closer and catching her in his arms, then quickly apologizes for being rough because there was no other choice. Looking around, he sees dozens more mechanisms ready to fire, while a slight is dealing with flying axes, completely confused because according to the professor, traps should not even appear until the 20th room, and they are only in the 3rd. The pressure already feels like high-level zones. At the same time, a slight tries to figure out what exactly Yu-won is using right now, because him and Rochelle keep getting targeted from every direction, no matter where they move. And at some point, the girl who was holding onto his back after his pet decisive actions wraps her arms around his waist, making Yu-won freeze for a split second and even blush, almost missing an attack. Spears and daggers are already about to reach them, but suddenly the traps get cut apart, and in the next moment, a slight descends using wings, asking how Yu-won manages to dodge like that. While Yu-won, together with Rochelle, is already moving on the hoverbike, weaving through attacks. Goyeon is nowhere to be seen, but nobody doubts she is fine, more likely watching everything from the side. A slight tries to understand how a trap like this even ends, guessing they just have to endure it, but no one knows the exact mechanic, so Yu-won tells him to move to the other side while he focuses on analyzing. Looking closer, he notices a pattern. All attacks prioritize a slight, which means the traps react to movement, and that explains why during the fall they should not have moved at all. At that moment, Rochelle points at an arrow. One of the traps actually hit Lilith, and it becomes clear they need to warn everyone to minimize movement. But here comes the dilemma. If they do not move, they cannot clear the room. However, while Yu-won is holding the arrow, he feels like he is extracting something from it. And that is strange because in the first room he could not do anything like that, meaning the conditions have changed. Checking his abilities, he finally confirms it. He has gained a new concept, and this time it is decapitation. Not a sword, but decapitation itself. And if you really think about it, this was already different from everything he had encountered before. At that moment, Rochelle suddenly points at a slight, who got caught in a trap. He is standing in a stream of water, letting his guard down because he only expected mechanical attacks, but no one even considered that the traps could release some kind of strange liquid. His senses are dulling, his vision is blurring, and if this keeps going, he will not be able to react to the next attack in time. Realizing this, Yu-won instantly rushes forward on the hoverbike, leaving Rochelle behind, because what he is about to do is pure gamble, and he does not want to drag her into it, only briefly telling her to stay put. Getting closer, he touches the water and, just as expected, extracts not the concept of water but the concept of wave. And at that moment, everything clicks into place. That is exactly why earlier he got not a sword but decapitation. Everything depends on the nature of the impact. Above them, Dokgoyan watches the situation moving along the columns, and the picture becomes clear. The state and behavior of a substance or attack at a specific moment determines what concept can be extracted, because those projectiles were targeting Yu-Won's neck, meaning they carried decapitation itself. At that exact moment, a new storm of arrows rushes toward a slight, and Yu-Won promises to handle it, activating his all-seeing sight. The deeper he develops it, the further he can see beyond physical form, reaching even the intent behind attacks, and now he is literally reading them. In his perception, all the arrows around turn into pure concepts, and he dashes straight into the stream, but instead of absorbing each one separately, he starts combining, splitting, and weaving them together. In the next moment, the entire room bursts with golden light, and when everything settles, Yu-Won calmly lands on the ground while a slight, still panicking, runs straight to him. In Yu-Won's hand is a strange multicolored sphere, as if it absorbed every attack directed at them earlier. And the feeling is that he gained something truly powerful, the ability to directly interact with traps and their nature. But they do not get time to discuss it because another volley flies at them, yet this time Rushel and Dokgoyan quickly deflect the attack, not missing the chance to call the guys out for their carelessness, because if they do not get rid of that habit one day, it will end much worse. Soon it becomes clear that this was the final wave, as another shift begins, and Dokgoyan once again starts lecturing a slight for losing focus and distracting Yu-Won between them. It has already turned into something like a constant back and forth, almost like a cat and dog dynamic, but at the same time it first shows how well they function as a team. Still, Dokgoyan had her own reason for not interfering earlier. She was simply waiting for the right moment. In the fourth room, the ceiling is lower than usual, at least nothing is going to drop on them from above like before. Yu-Won starts attacking the creatures ahead, but they do not even flinch. These are tower spiders that casually deflect all of Eva's attacks. Their stats are random, not tied to the floor, which means Yu-Won's current weapon setup just is not effective enough. Looks like this time Dokgoyan has to step in. The hero can barely believe monsters this strong are already showing up. Dokgoyan moves forward, tells everyone to stay back, and orders Yu-Won to watch closely. This is exactly what he was looking for, and then she demonstrates a wind burst. A massive wave of air wipes the spiders out instantly. It looks even stronger than Eva's bullets. Most of them are knocked out. Dokgoyan tells Yu-Won to finish them off. Honestly, is there a more merciful ruler than her? Fine, a slight will cover the rear, while Rushel keeps an eye on above just in case. It is kind of surprising Dokgoyan is not his ruler, but Yu-Won did not expect this level of attentiveness from her. Hard not to feel grateful for that. The hero swings for a killing blow, but the spiders are way too tough. Suddenly, one of them leaps straight at him. He steps back and pierces its body. It works, but if he cannot cut them down, it is pointless. He cannot just keep stabbing and retreating while surrounded by so many enemies. Looks like tower spiders are still too much for him. But then he remembers something from the previous room. He completely forgot about the cutting concept, and now is the perfect time to test how it works with his sword. Yu-Won enhances the executioner longsword and charges. The monsters start getting sliced like soft tofu. Wait, that strike was clean, but it feels like he used way more force than needed. He decides to try again and do it properly. Dokgoyan watches carefully, and it is obvious to her that in that brief moment, Yu-Won did something to his blade. He managed to cut through enemies he could not even scratch before. That is insane, someone pulling off such intuitive and overwhelming growth. And on top of that, Yu-Won is refining his technique, not just relying on raw power. Usually when someone upgrades their weapon, they just swing it around like an idiot, but he does not have that flaw. Maybe not now, but one day he will grasp the true essence of a cutting strike on his own. Dokgoyan sees no need to interfere anymore, but at the same time it feels like a waste to just leave things as they are. After overcoming 3 calamities, she took pride in being the greatest martial genius of her world. And yet here she stands watching someone whose talent makes her past look almost insignificant. That will not do. Dokgoyan decides she has to make this guy hers. Yu-Won suddenly goes quiet in a weird way. A chill runs down his spine like some elite monster is about to crawl out of nowhere. And on top of that, Dokgoyan is staring at him like she already buried him in her mind. The room seems cleared, everything calm and right at that exact moment, because of course it is. They all receive an external message straight from the rector demanding they leave the tower immediately. Why now? Dokgoyan is clearly not happy about it. She just started getting into the flow and still has not gotten her precious soda. But before they can even process it, Rushel suddenly shouts that something is coming, and right in front of them, red portals begin to open, a lot of portals. And inside are hundreds of spiders, straight nightmare fuel, and that is when it clicks. This is what Yumina warned about, and why no one could properly determine the room difficulty. Dokgoyan tries to activate her pendant, but the student badge suddenly decides to take a vacation. That is it, they are officially trapped. Endless waves of spiders pour out of the portals, and now they are facing that exact phenomenon where even students can die: spatial irregularity, an invasion of spatial pirates, the whole package. And the main problem is that it creates instability, and instability means the rules of the tower just get thrown out the window. Safe zones turn deadly, monsters spawn like they are being mass-produced, difficulty spikes like crypto prices, and all of it happens at once. Yumina warned them, but like always, you do not really get it until you are in it yourself. The team pushes into a more open room, but it does not help because these things just do not stop. Dogoyan holds them back with wind. A slight swings his sword like his scholarship depends on it. The two of them have already taken down a ton, but both are clearly running out of steam, and Rushel is getting worse. Her hair is already more than halfway black. She is silent, just growling, and if this fully completes, it will be a disaster. Dokgoyan realizes they cannot keep this up much longer. A little more and everything collapses, and right at that moment, Yu-Won casually hands her that same soda and she smirks, asking if he is not overestimating himself. In response, he silently pulls the pin from a grenade and tells her to watch closely, and then the show starts. The grenade lights up in different colors like it decided to become a holiday tree, and then explodes with such force the spiders probably regretted being born. Yu-Won clearly put his soul into crafting that thing. After that, he hops onto the hoverbike and tells Aslight to take a break because he is already at his limit. Rochelle is still holding on, but she is too unstable to rely on right now, and with this endless flood of monsters, no one knows how long they can last, so the best plan is to let the team recover while he handles the chaos himself. And right in the middle of the fight, something else happens. His long sword's blood poison gets stronger, and on a sensory level he catches a new concept, a cleaving strike, and in that moment his blade starts glowing red like it also realized things are about to get serious. It is still not clear how exactly this blood poison works, but if you do not test it, you will never know. So Yu-Won without hesitation swings his sword and cuts through several spiders, and right away it becomes obvious that the trajectory of the strike has expanded, as if the cleaving strike boosts the cutting power itself. Then the blood poison extends the reach, but everything comes at a cost. With every swing he literally feels himself losing blood like he is draining it bit by bit, so spamming this is definitely not an option. Right at that moment, Aslight and Dokyeon move up to him while Rushel in the meantime is unleashing a full apocalypse on the spiders. That area is basically off limits. As the team catches a short breath, it becomes noticeable that the swarm is thinning out, and that usually means one of two things. Either the fight is ending or something is about to show up that makes everything before look like a warm-up, and of course in front of them appears a massive spider, the kind you would normally see no earlier than the 50th room. Aslight nervously turns around and starts practically smacking Yu-Won on the shoulder because the surprises are not over. The elite monster is not alone. Another one is already closing in from behind, and now the situation is officially as bad as it gets. This climb has completely stopped following any kind of rules. At that moment, Rochelle with a crazed look charges forward, attacking without any caution, and strangely enough, Yu-Won decides that might actually work, ordering Aslight to stay with her. Let them handle one from the front while he and Dokoyan take the other. It sounds confident, almost like a plan, but in reality he has no clear idea how to take down something like that. Sure, he has the cleaving strike and blood poison, but who says that is enough? Dokgoyan immediately points out that he was supposed to fight together with her, and she clearly understands he cannot handle this alone, yet he still stubbornly refuses to ask for help, and with a slight smirk she asks if that is pride or just his personality. At the same time, she casually adds that she liked the soda, so from this point on he can consider his debt paid with that drink. Then unexpectedly she draws a sword, even though she could crush the enemy without it, and for a moment it feels like she is about to teach him something, but she instantly shuts that idea down, saying she just does not want to get her hands dirty. Still, she makes it clear that Yu-Won is missing just one element, one action, and she will show it only once, and that should be enough if he is not blind. She prepares herself and tells him to watch carefully while on the other side. Rochelle is already trying to latch onto Aslight, completely losing control even though the second monster is still right behind him. And suddenly she jumps away straight toward the spider, looking just as dangerous herself. It feels like another insane show is about to start, and Yu-Won gets distracted for a split second, but then Do-Goyan sharply calls out to him again, forcing him to turn his head, and he just freezes because the moment he looks, the massive monster is already cut clean in half, a perfectly precise strike, and now only one remains. It was just a single sword swing, as simple as it gets from bottom to top, but what Yu-Won saw inside that strike completely shattered his footing. There was death in that cut. Not just an attack, but a feeling like the boundary of the world itself cracked open for a moment. He just stood there trying to process it while his internal code was going insane the moment he barely grasped even a fragment of that martial art. The power of that strike reminded him of the moment Dokgoyon broke Ortima's force field, which means this was not just a technique but an evolved form of movement that literally pierces through the very concept of death. How can a person pour that kind of will into a single sword strike? That same concept of death he had just started to understand suddenly became crystal clear, and at the same time terrifying down to his bones. And then Dokoyon was suddenly right next to him again like she teleported and casually tossed him the elite spider core. Yu-Won froze for a second. Technically she killed it, and taking the reward felt kind of wrong, but she immediately shut that down, saying it is his reward, and he should stop pretending to be some humble hero. Meanwhile, somewhere in the background, a Slight is already yelling at them to stop flirting and get over there because Russell has completely lost it. Logically, the only one who can stop her is Dak Goyon, but she calmly says she already did her part, and he should not be looking at her like that. Yu-Won hesitates for a moment, but for some reason feels like she will not like it, and still asks her for help because the situation is abnormal, and if someone dies now, there is no telling how this will end. Something clicks in Do-Goyon, and like she is doing him a favor, she agrees to entertain Richelle, but on one condition: Yu-Won handles whatever ends up under the spider's claws. Not exactly clear, but there is no time to question it. Do-Goyon walks up to the spider, tells Richelle to come down, and she obediently jumps, and then things turn surreal. Do-Goyon teases her for a second, and then just grabs her and flips her over. She tells Russell to get back up and promises to play with her until she regains control while Yu-Won has to deal with the spider. Sounds simple, but in reality it is a serious challenge. However, Dokoyon is confident if he truly saw her first strike, then he can reproduce its essence. At that moment the spider, even though barely hanging on, still believes it can crush Yu-Won without effort, and he decides to test that. He summons Eva and dozens of chains lock down the monster's legs. The idea is clear: immobilize it completely and then deliver a cleaving strike enhanced by blood poison. The plan looks almost perfect, but as always, something goes wrong. The strike lands there as a wound, but shallow. At this rate, he will be chipping away at it forever, and to kill it he needs to take the head. Yu-Won tries to understand where he messed up, why the cleaving strike came out so short, and why the blood poison barely worked. And right then everything starts falling apart. Eva's chains begin to snap under the pressure, and it becomes obvious using two abilities back to back is not the same as synchronizing them, and he has never actually done that before. Meanwhile, the spider wastes no time and starts slamming its legs into the ground with insane force, and with each hit it becomes clearer he cannot hold it much longer. Yu-Won actually panics for the first time for real, because reading about combining abilities is one thing, and trying to pull it off in the middle of a fight where you are about to get crushed is something else entirely. And he has never even used two abilities back to back, let alone at the same time. The tension in the air is so thick you could cut it when the spider's leg is already coming down on him, and it feels like that is it, game over. But at the last moment he manages to raise his sword and block the strike, then instantly shifts the blade to the side and exhales like he just dragged himself back from death. For a split second he truly thought it was over, but the moment the leg touched the blade he instinctively changed the angle and did not just endure the hit, he redirected it. If he had taken it head on, both the sword and his arm would have shattered without question. And now the real question is, how did he even feel that, because it all happened in a fraction of a second that in his perception stretched into eternity. It has to be because of that strike from Dokyeon he saw earlier, and as if confirming it, the system announces a new concept: acquired flow. That single swing really left a mark on him. Yu-Won did not even realize there was something like this inside him, some kind of martial arts core just waiting for a trigger to wake up. He cannot replicate Dokgoyon's technique perfectly, but now he understands the principle, and that alone is enough to try again. He focuses, waits for the next attack, and goes all in. Essentially, he is attempting a parry, not just blocking but redirecting the attack, stripping the opponent of advantage and creating an opening for a counter. Sounds cool, but in reality it is one of the fastest ways to die if you mess up even slightly. A Slight watching all of this is already mentally switching to a safer lifestyle because experimenting like this in the middle of a fight is pure insanity. But Yu-Won keeps going. He takes one attack head on, then redirects another coming from the side, then again and again, and gradually he starts seeing the spider's movements like they are slowing down. Meanwhile, Russell is still chasing Dokgoyon, who is basically just playing with her, teasing and dodging every strike effortlessly. Even Dokgoyon did not expect Yu-Won to grasp her technique in such an unconventional way. A style based on the concept of flow actually exists somewhere in the central planes, but almost no one tries to master it because redirecting attacks in fractions of a second requires a completely broken level of perception, and the risk is insane, so most people go for something simpler like a slight. But Yu-Won is doing the exact opposite, and it even makes Do-Goyon, who spent her whole life mastering destruction, rethink things, because what looks like a trick actually has insane depth. It is impressive, but clearly defense alone will not win the fight. He has to go beyond that, and since he has come this far, Do-Goyon wants to see if he can take it further. If he can reflect force, then he can use it for offense as well. And at some point, everything aligns piercing rotation flow, and when he catches the perfect moment, the spider is cut clean in half. Yu-1 actually pulled it off. Not just one, but forged a whole new, even more busted concept for himself. And something inside him clearly shifted hard, like his whole system just leveled up on a different tier, but yeah, no time to vibe. The squad instantly calls him over to deal with Russell, who is still going full berserk mode. And even Dako-yun admits her stamina is straight up monstrous, saying it would be nice to just tie her up like that spider. And Yu-1 is like, wait, why not? He recalls the web that once trapped a slight, pulls the concept out of it, feeds it to Eva, and boom, creates a chain net that drops right onto Russell. Of course she tries to break free, but the more she struggles, the tighter the chains squeeze, and they are also draining her magic on top of that. At some point, the scene gets so awkward that the guys just turn away, pretending they are not even there. Eventually, things calm down more or less, but something feels off. The transition does not trigger. Instead, the student ID activates again, and the idea of getting the hell out of here suddenly sounds like the smartest move ever. And then, like the cherry on top, a red mass appears in the air, saying those who cleared the trial will receive a reward. It takes the form of a female silhouette, offering a contract with the thousand-eyed observer. Meanwhile, outside, Yumina is already stressing, waiting for the group, and when the portal finally opens, it almost blasts her back with a wave of energy. The squad returns alive, and she was seriously worried because there was an announcement to evacuate the tower immediately, but no one came out. She instantly starts asking what happened in there and if everything got cleared. The group exchanges looks like, yeah, this is a long story, and suggests taking a walk. Turns out after the fourth shift, they ended up in an anomaly room, and barely any time passed inside, but outside it is way worse. Yumina says one student got killed by an outsider, and now the academy is trying to figure it out. The teammates are in shock, and this is exactly what caused everything to spiral. Spatial pirates are targeting newbies specifically, because if you kill a student and take their ticket, they will never respawn and will be stuck in the tower forever. The attacker got away. No one could stop them. Dako-yun instantly senses something is off. To her, this looks like a perfectly planned scheme. Break into the tower, kill a freshman, wreck the academy's reputation, and also grab a ticket and conqueror status. And now it becomes clear why the academy acts like this. By calling these attacks trials, they are just dodging responsibility. Dako-yun straight up says this sounds absurd for an institution that calls itself the greatest, because the tower is basically the meaning of life for students, yet they can just get killed there like nothing. Yumin answers that there is a reason for everything. The academy must protect students, but only before they enter the tower. Inside it is their own responsibility, and if the tower itself chooses the offender, the academy has no right to interfere. And weirdly enough, Dako-yun starts liking this even more. She grabs her ticket and just vanishes. Yu-1, after everything, says there was something even more disturbing inside, and right before leaving, they ran into something. The group exchanges looks, and he calmly drops it. It was a constellation. Constellations are not just some random entities, they are straight-up transcendent patrons and watchers, beings that oversee countless dimensions and pick out the ones who catch their eye, and when they find someone worthy, they offer a contract. And with it comes power, magic, unique abilities, artifacts, everything that can launch you to a whole different level. But yeah, the price matches the reward, and in a world where power is everything, almost no one can say no. It is just way too tempting, and it was exactly this kind of being, the observer of all landmarks, that reached out to Yu-1 offering him authority in exchange for fulfilling her conditions, and Yumina practically lit up hearing this because this is the first time in the Academy's history that contact with a constellation happened this early. It is direct proof of their insane potential. But a Slight and Russell were not hyped at all because even though the Academy stays neutral and even encourages these contracts when possible, the whole situation felt off. There is no protection from killers, but toward unknown entities they act almost friendly. And when Yumina asked what the deal actually was, the answer hit brutal: murder. The constellation offered a contract to whichever two of them would kill the other two first, basically forcing them to cut down their own teammates and bring her their blood in exchange for power, promising to treat them as direct heirs of her lineage and support them all the way to the top of the tower. After that, she casually told them to begin, like it was just some game. Yu-1 did not even consider that option. But before things escalated further, Dako-yun suddenly unleashed her energy and straight up pushed the constellation away, refusing to have anything to do with a being that treats their lives like toys. And just facing a trial like that left a seriously nasty aftertaste. After that, it was announced that access to the tower would be closed for a week while they search for the attacker, which is insanely inconvenient with the duel against Erecto coming up on Tuesday, so all they can do now is train. Yu-1 considers filing a report using the camera recordings, and Yumin wanted to talk everything over with food. but everyone is way too drained, both physically and mentally. She still praises them for their work and promises to do everything so something like this never happens again, hoping they have not lost faith in the academy. After that, Rushel and a Slight head off to rest. But Yuman stops Yu-1. She has a theory. The constellation did not actually choose 2 out of 4, it specifically chose him and Dokoyan, and that gets confirmed. Meaning it was not just about turning them against each other, it was more like a selection process, like sifting gold and throwing away the rest. According to the observer, Yu-1 and Dokoyan are guaranteed to reach the top if they get rid of the dead weight in the form of Rochelle and a Slight. Only the most promising are meant to survive, and real life is about killing and taking. Later, back in his room, Yu-1 finds a Slight in a weird state. He is sitting hunched over almost like Rochelle, even though that is totally not like him. And when Yu-1 tries to tease him, he snaps, then apologizes and says he just wanted to vent, adding that even insults will not help. Almost none of his former pride is left, and at the end he suddenly admits it. He thinks he hates Yu-1. Yu-1 was thrown off at first, but then he fired back saying he hated a Slight too just to ride the wave, but it only made things more awkward and this weird silence filled the room. So then he got serious and told him to just say something, anything, complaints, anger, whatever, he would listen. And a Slight finally let it all out. In his world he was not just talented, he was one of the absolute best, and everyone knew it. His family, the servants, everyone around him, and they gave him the sacred sword, not for pretty words but as a real chance to save their world, making him a guardian and giving him the power of the tower. He came to the academy carrying insane expectations, but now he feels like dead weight no matter what he does. Yu-1 tried to calm him down, saying he should not take the words of some godlike beings too seriously. But for a Slight it sounds different, because Yu-1 can say that since he already proved how strong he is, while he himself feels like nothing more than a side character standing next to the chosen ones. And on top of that, he thinks those beings are way stronger and smarter than humans, and he honestly cannot understand how Yu-1 and Dokoyan refused their offer so easily. Yu-1 answers that there are other ways to become strong without sacrificing someone, but a Slight still believes it is easy for him to say because of his talent, and that he himself might not have been able to refuse. He is torn apart by anger, fear, and disappointment in himself, and he cannot accept it. Later, when Yu-1 comes out of the shower, a Slight is already in bed, and suddenly apologizes for whining, saying it is not really about Yu-1, he is just jealous. Yu-1 just smiles calmly and says they are friends and he will always listen. Then he says he is going out for a bit and offers to bring him hot chocolate. He notices to himself that a Slight has changed a lot since their first meeting, but the moment he steps into the hallway he runs into Dokoyan, who somehow ended up in the male dorm, and then just drags him outside. Turns out she was wandering nearby and decided to check on their dead weight, a Slight. Yu-1 gets mad, but Dokoyan stays cold and harsh, and straight up calls him pathetic, not because he has no ability at all, but because everything he has is tied to the sword, his power, his body, his instincts, his skills, and in a critical moment he freezes and can get others hurt. According to her, Rushel is also starting to feel his own weakness. Yu-1 cannot tell if this is just insults or some kind of tough care, so he switches the topic to her because after the meeting with the constellation she has been acting weird and she got irritated in front of the professor. He asks her directly if she is okay. Dokoyan gets a little embarrassed, but her emotions were already all over her face, and Yu-1 pours her hot chocolate and gently asks again. She calms down a little, takes a sip, and admits that it is nothing serious, she was just really pissed off back then. Especially because of what the observer said, and it looks like she is still replaying those words in her head. If back then a Slight and Rushel had not helped, Dokoyan seriously considered the possibility of getting rid of them, and that was exactly what made her even angrier, the realization that with just a little more determination she could have gone down that path. Not necessarily with her own hands, but at least by simply letting them die. In truth, it was not even the constellation's offer that pissed her off the most, but the fact that she might have agreed to it. Yu-1 just sighed at that and calmly said that then she could also be considered stupid, which made her snort and immediately change the subject, asking if he really thought those two were talented. For her the question was simple. Even the most outstanding potential means nothing if it is never realized, but Yu-1 explained it differently. A Slight does have talent, otherwise he would never be able to wield a sword like that. The problem is that he relies on it too much and gets lost without it, not adapting fast enough. Rushel has a similar situation. She has enormous power, but it is held back by inner contradictions, and if they manage to overcome that themselves, their growth might surpass anything that even he and Dokoyan can imagine right now. After a pause, she finally agrees. Fine, she will trust him and give them a chance, but on one condition. If the result does not satisfy her, the responsibility will fall on Yu-1 for making her waste time on those idiots. After throwing that out, she leaves, ordering him to bring them tomorrow morning. The next day, everything starts as brutally as possible. Dakoyun just beats a slight in sparring, and when he gets angry saying he came to learn, she calmly answers that this is training of the body and for him nothing else will work. She immediately takes away his main crutch. She takes his sword saying that until he learns to fight without it he will not get it back. Yuan tries to support him, convincing him that this will make him stronger, and asks him to trust them at least once and try. And a slight, even with doubts, agrees if Yuan has a plan then there must be a reason. He steadies himself, raises his fists, and immediately gets punched in the face. Dakoyun does not give him a single second to breathe, demanding that he not just look but feel the attacks with his whole body, otherwise he will keep missing hits. And then it becomes obvious just how bad everything is without the sword. His stats literally drop before their eyes like the strength is being drained out of him, even though normally he is a real monster who could even handle a recto. If the reason really is the sword, then his dependence is far more serious than they thought. Dakoyun keeps pressing, ordering him to stop clinging to the weapon and focus on the opponent, and at some point something strange happens. A flash of golden light blinds her and a slight suddenly changes. His hair becomes longer, his figure more rounded as if he took on a completely different form. Dakoyun watched with narrowed eyes like she was trying to figure out whether a slight was finally tired of hiding or if something forced that hidden presence to break out. But he was no longer standing, his body just shut down and he collapsed to the ground. And for a brief moment something bright flared in his chest, and then it all vanished just as suddenly as it appeared, returning him to his usual male state. Yet now it was obvious he himself understood what the problem was and could not ignore it anymore. So gathering the last of his strength he suggested continuing sparring. Dakoyan admitted her mistake because she had seen him as nothing but a useless idiot when in reality he turned out to be an idiot carrying a bomb inside him, and all that was left was to hope that bomb would not go off somewhere inside the tower. At the same time, Yu-Won was completely lost in thought, replaying what he had seen, wondering if it was a holy spirit or something demonic, and how such opposite concepts could even exist in one body. He decided that later he would definitely talk to a Slight about it back in the dorm. Meanwhile, Russell also wanted to train even if it was risky, but Yu-Won had ways to hold her back, and the girl herself looked unusually determined, like yesterday's events did not break her, but instead made her want to control her power and become useful. He handed her a wooden sword, suggesting she set her own pace, not turning the training into a chaotic slaughter like with Dakoyan and a Slight, but gradually increasing the intensity. Yu-Won caught himself thinking that he had imagined university life differently, not as an endless chain of fights, blows, and tension, but as a time when you grow next to someone, support each other, and become stronger together. And now standing next to Russell, that picture was starting to come to life. He told her she could attack at any moment, and she instantly snapped into a monstrous form, making him literally yelp in surprise, and in just 5 minutes the situation spiraled so far out of control that he shouted at Ava to hold her tighter until she finally calmed down and returned to normal, immediately starting to worry if he got hurt, while he just gently reassured her, patting her head and letting her know everything was under control because he had been ready for this from the start. Dakoyan, watching this, got openly irritated, thinking that while she was grinding through training, Yu-Won was just casually flirting with a beast, even suspecting Russell of some hidden motives, although she instead got flustered again and looked way too soft compared to the harsh Dakoyan. And still it was impossible not to admit that her motivation after everything she went through was already something incredible, and Yu-Won himself would probably have dropped out of life for a while, whereas Russell, despite her inner state, kept moving forward. And right at that moment, another twist surfaced. Yu-Won received permission to take someone with him outside the academy grounds and without hesitation decided that Russell would go with him, which completely shocked Dakoyan and then pushed it even further by basically inviting Russell on a date, turning an already intense day into something completely unexpected. Yu-Won promised he would be back before evening, but that did not calm Dakoyan or a Slight at all, and both of them looked clearly displeased. And right at that moment, Russell appeared, already changed into the outfit he had advised her to wear, and the clothes emphasized her figure, making her look unusual and genuinely stunning. And the girl herself was practically glowing with anticipation because a big city was something completely new for her. Yu-Won suggested they just take a walk, but the moment they stepped into the crowded trade district, Russell instantly got lost in the chaos of people, and within a second he was no longer beside her, and panic had only just begun to rise when he suddenly grabbed her hand and calmly apologized, realizing he had not considered that all of this was her first time, and so he suggested they not let go of each other's hands while they were here. After that, everything seemed to flow on its own. They walked, went into shops, tried food, laughed, and from the outside really looked like an ordinary cute couple. In the evening, they went into a cafe and Russell was sincerely amazed by the taste of the meat, almost not there, believing that she was eating Elon meat just like that, calmly in the city, and all of it thanks to Yu-Won. But at some point her expression changed, joy mixed with anxiety, and she felt too happy, like she had no right to feel this way, because he had done so much for her, brought her to the city, bought her beautiful things, treated her to delicious food, and she could give nothing in return. And at that very moment, Yuan, as if reading her from the inside, held out his hand, and above it her own emotions began to take shape in the form of a concept. In that short time, he managed to catch even such subtle changes, showing that if they became closer, they would be able to deal with her inner problems, but then he simply closed his hands as if erasing it, and with a light smile made it clear that right now it did not matter again, promising that he would help her deal with everything and that today she should just allow herself to be happy. Russell caught herself wanting to be closer to him, to know him better, just like Goyon does, even though she does not fully understand their strange dynamic, and Yuan just waves it off, saying there is nothing friendly about Goyon and that she rather sees him as a tool she wants to possess, but Russell only laughs and it becomes easier for her because he no longer seems all-knowing and unreachable, and that is exactly what gives her the feeling that she can also try, that she can also be by his side. Inspired, she suggests continuing the walk, deciding that since he had already bought her so many things, now she would choose clothes for him. At the same time, in a completely different setting, Yumina was sitting at a meeting of the teachers where the atmosphere was much more tense. Everyone was outraged that the chronicles of the climb up the tower had somehow been spread by beings from the lower dimension and valuable information had leaked outside. For them, this was a serious violation, and it did not matter how Yumina herself felt about it. The fact was that Yuan's actions were already going beyond what was allowed, putting the authority of the academy into question. And now the question was direct, whether she was ready to take responsibility for allowing this student to act so freely. When Yuan first announced that he was going to conquer the tower and record videos, Yumina did not see anything serious in his words because no artifacts or outside devices can function inside the tower, and such attempts are doomed to fail from the start. However, the hero demonstrated the result in practice, and the point was not just that he brought back a recording, but that he created a device that could actually work under the conditions of the tower, and that alone already looked almost like magic. On top of that, Yuan saw their group uprising, not just as a union of friends, but as a way to gain the favor of other students, because even though information about the tower was hard for them to obtain, the others were struggling too, and the more knowledge they could pass on, the better it would be for everyone. And besides him and the kid, there was no other way to get a recording. Yumina had once spoken about the unfairness of academic reality, but she had never thought that someone would dare to act so boldly and unconventionally, and now she watched as Yuan quickly strengthened their position so that the professor could feel more at ease in this intention, both unusual and beautiful, felt like a sign of something grand, something that could overcome the gap between dimensions, and maybe because of that, Yumina felt that she could trust him and support what he was doing. She stood up and said that publishing videos from the tower was Yuan's personal matter, and she did not understand the questions of Professor Alex Canton, who only smiled, noting her special attitude toward the student, while Professor Talia Liliana Campanella, who had 200 years of experience, demanded an honest answer about who this guy was, because Ryu Chulmin also believed that spreading such valuable information without control was unacceptable. The key question was how to use Yuan's unique abilities, and Professor Canton suggested explaining the principle behind them, because artifacts created outside the tower usually do not work inside, and no circuit can withstand the waves of mana, which is an absolute law, but Ban Yuan, being from the lower dimension and having no mana, somehow managed to bypass this limitation, and that made him truly special. Talia demanded the artifact that contained the recorded video in order to study the technology, but Yumina refused to hand it over, believing that it was the student's achievement, and the room filled with noise until the vice-rector of the academy, Zenon Union, asked everyone to calm down and refrain from comments, instantly making the professors fall silent. For Talia, a person with such authority, Yuan's artifact looked unique, and it was difficult to accept this fact without inner resistance, and Zenon, summing it all up, stated that Ban Yuan was the only student in the world recognized by the tower, which many teachers considered an overly reckless statement, but there was another reason to consider him special. Zenon suggested sharing facts that were not included in the video, and Yumina, confused, listened as the vice-rector explained in detail that Ban Yuan and his classmates were the only ones among all who climbed the tower who had been chosen by the constellations, and that meant their fate and their possibilities went beyond the ordinary reality of the academy, making them unique and truly outstanding. Yumina calmly asked the vice-rector to be careful with his words, but he clearly was not planning to stop and went even further, asking an unexpected question about whether the students had made a contract with the constellation, and she answered that they had refused, and Zenon immediately suggested that it must have been difficult for them to openly show their intentions under the pressure of a transcendent being, and after that he proposed inviting their entire class to his lecture, because the important thing was not the contract itself, but the fact that these students had been chosen by a Phi constellation and now other constellations would definitely take interest in them, so they needed support at Zenon's lectures because he specialized in teaching those who were chosen, which meant that Yu1 automatically became his student. After that, the meeting continued with the usual teacher agenda, but now it was clear that the goal of the meeting was not to corner Yu1 at all, and the vice-rector's words reflected the intentions of the rector, clearly warning the teaching staff that anyone who put pressure on the hero, whether professor or student, risked being expelled from the academy. And who would have thought that Yu-won would manage to gain such strong favor from the rector? Professor Canton even suggested that Yumina go to a bar with him and make a toast to the success of her student, but she politely brushed him off and left, and the next day the students literally surrounded Yu-won just to get at least a bit of his attention because his channel went viral after the tower climbing video, and had already passed 2 million subscribers, so now it was almost impossible to find someone who did not know about Uprising. Honestly, Da Guoyan did not expect that the schemes they had done would turn out to be so impressive, and Yu-won's ideas and abilities really amazed her while Rushel carefully watched Da Guoyan's reaction. Finally, the hero joined his friends at the table, but then someone else started complaining about the noise caused by the edited video because one group of students could not believe that someone had cleared 4 rooms in such a short time, and tomorrow all that lie would be exposed because it would be the day of Yu-won's duel with the mighty Erecto, and those who still disliked him were eagerly waiting to see him get crushed. Duk Go-yun, watching this, suggested that he should just live up to expectations as much as he could, and that they should support him because tomorrow would at least be the best possible event to attract new subscribers, and both opponents had signed consent for the duel to be broadcast, which confused Yu-won a bit because the rules were strict. If someone could not continue or surrendered, the duel would end. Hitting vital points was forbidden, and injuries were at your own risk, and the hero could not believe it when Erecto added that Yu-won could surrender only if he crawled between his legs and barked like a dog, and his eyes almost popped out because he simply could not believe such arrogance. The day of the duel had come, and the feeling was like everyone had gathered to watch one guy get blown to dust. The stands were screaming for Erecto, the stream had already passed 10,000 viewers, and half the chat was busy trashing Yu-won. Rebellion had almost no fans, they could be counted on the fingers of one hand, so right now he had no right to mess this up. When a crowd like that was watching you, either you prove you are not a nobody or they write you off for good, and it does not matter if you have potential or not. And that cringe with the offer to crawl between his legs and bark like a dog sounded like Erecto memorized lines from a cheap novel and was now proudly spitting them out. He stood there clearly enjoying the moment, checking how long Yu-won could keep a stone face, but he did not fall for it, calmly drew his sword and told him to come and try. Professor June immediately announced the start, and now a giant fist was flying forward like it was about to end the fight in a second. Yu-won moved sharply forward, and from the side it looked like he was about to take it to the face at full speed. But then the interesting part began. Against a pile of muscle and stone like that, he used what he recently learned from Do Goyon. The technique was simple but genius. You take the enemy attack and use it against him. Do Goyon chased him with a club at different speeds and power, constantly changing rhythm, and if he learned to read that even once, then someone like Erecto should not be able to touch him at all. That is exactly what happened. The big guy almost never hit, and Yu-won on the contrary kept smashing him in the face again and again. Before every strike he filled the sword with wave energy, and Erecto body, as luck would have it, conducted that wave perfectly. In the end, every hit felt even stronger, and at some point Yu-won calmly told him to stop whining and start fighting for real. And if he did not want to keep getting wrecked, they could end it right now. After that, Erecto completely lost it. The very fact that some guy from the lower dimension was looking down on him pissed him off. He slammed the ground again with his huge hand, but now it looked pathetic because after the first hit, he should have at least tried to change tactics. If he kept swinging the same way, ignoring everything that was happening, Yu-won simply had no choice but to keep dismantling him the same way again and again. Vice-Rector Zenon calmly watched this strange fight. The spectators were also starting to get confused and could not figure out why Erecto was fighting like he was holding back, because Yu-won, compared to what he was like at admission, had become a completely different person, and it was obvious even to the naked eye. Already at the very beginning of the fight, Erecto was knocked off his feet, and it became clear that everything shown in the videos was not editing and not fairy tales. Teacher June at this moment began to noticeably get nervous because just a week ago there was not even a hint of such power in Yu-won. It was like the guy had leveled up in a couple of days, like in a game after cheat codes, and right then June received a message from the teachers' meeting while Yu-won, at that time, just stood there thinking what to do next. Beating someone who could barely move already looked as pathetic as it gets, but he did not have time to finish the thought because the professor suddenly shouted that by the decision of the observers, the fight was over. Erecto was declared unable to continue, and Yu-won was seriously pissed because if he was the one getting beaten, nobody would have even moved to stop the fight, but there was no choice. He left the arena, and in fact the fight ended without an official winner, even though everyone already understood who was stronger here. The situation was unpleasant, but he definitely did not look like the loser, and that was already a plus. But Erecto was not going to accept this outcome at all. He was being torn apart by anger. He was not ready to accept that some guy from the lower dimension had made him look like this, and he suddenly rushed at Yu-won again, and June, instead of stopping it, just shouted for Yu-won to dodge, And here a logical question appeared. Why even dodge if the opponent is openly ignoring the rules? For Erecto, the order to stop was like it did not exist because against him was supposedly some nobody, and at that moment Yuan was already openly furious at this whole system where first they allow a fight and then suddenly cut everything off when it is Vigidna for someone, and where some are unhappy with the result and others hide behind the rules, and in the end he just walked up and cut off Erecto arm. The stands went silent like someone turned off the sound. Around him people immediately started saying the arm could be restored, not a tragedy. And at that exact moment, Yu-1 received an offer to take the stats from that very arm. Erecto himself, screaming in pain, was quickly carried away from the field, and the professor started going off on Yu-1 for disobedience. He calmly apologized but honestly said that in such a situation it was hard to act differently, and then suddenly Zenon stepped in and asked June to stop. He said he would handle it himself, then calmly congratulated Yu-1 and introduced himself. The atmosphere immediately changed because now the conversation was on a completely different level. Zenon said he would ask a few questions and expected honest answers, and first of all he clarified that Yu-1 could have simply dodged that stupid attack. Besides, the teacher stopped the fight because of the huge difference in power, and now the main question that interested him was why he still did not dodge. Yu-1 had kind of already learned how to use this power of his called the Word, but honestly he himself did not fully get what it even was and what you were supposed to do with it. And then a question comes from the screen with so much pressure, like you are about to get crushed mentally. Instead of dodging nicely, he goes for a counter because in his opinion, if some student decided that rules were just recommendations, then he should feel the consequences on his own skin so others would not get funny ideas about playing dirty. And in front of a whole crowd, Erecto completely ignores the signal that the fight is over and basically tries to finish him off, so at that point there are no options. Yu-1 is not going to pretend everything is fine, especially when we are talking about a student from the lower dimension. He believes he acted according to the academy rules, and that is it. By the way, he answers very smartly, understanding that half the academy is listening to him, and he turns a personal clash into almost a public issue, like let us decide, do we have rules or do we just fight however we want? Zenon in general agrees yes, violators should be punished, but my friend, that is actually the job of the teachers, not the students, no matter how cool you are. Yu-1 does not argue, calmly apologizes for stepping outside his responsibility, and says he is ready to accept punishment. But then an unexpected twist, Zenon is not interested in punishment at all. He is just genuinely curious what was going on in this guy's head. And he quickly realizes Yu-1 not only has character, but also speaks well enough that he could even win over a constellation. In the end, the verdict is Erecto is guilty and Yu-1 actions are pure self-defense. Teacher June tried to protest, but he was shut down so fast that he ended up exposing himself too, and now he will have to deal with the consequences. The students are shocked. Zenon sends everyone back to classes, lets Yu-1 go, but throws in a line like, "We will see each other again." Yu-1 thanks his people for the support. Everyone notes that his swordsmanship was straight fire. Dokoyon especially loved the fight, and instead of asking about training, she asks about that same Erecto arm. She immediately figured out that he absorbed it. Yu-1 admits that he only took a small amount of stats just in case and already felt that he became stronger, and before he could not work so selectively with the concepts of living beings, but now it seems he can literally cut out the pieces he needs. But instead of joy, he looks kind of dark at first. He was happy, and then it hit him that it was actually a human arm, not some monster, and he started to feel uneasy. Dokian sharply snaps him out of it because Erecto tried to kill him and basically got off easy. It does not matter who it was, if someone tries to take your life, it is not the time for moral dilemmas. Yu-1 agrees that maybe he really is overthinking it, and in general worrying about that is not the best idea. They start arguing each with their own truth, and then like by the law of the genre, Yu-1 gets another message and it looks like a quiet life is postponed again. They get forced into a mandatory course called Constellations of Babylon, taught by Zenon himself. And there are no options here if you like it or not. You sit down and listen to how to properly befriend constellations, bargain with them, and carefully jump from one patron to another. The group arrives on the senior floor, and there is already a loud buzz. Everyone is talking, giving sideways looks. People are annoyed by Yu-1's confident attitude, but he does not care at all. And the more people curse you, the longer you live. Russell gently pulls his sleeve, worried after yesterday. After all, he now has fewer fans and more haters, but he calms her down. Yes, it is unpleasant, but it is better than when nobody notices you at all. And to completely finish off the atmosphere, he even pats her on the head. Maximum cuteness right until Dokoyon steps in with an ice-cold comment about the clothes he gave her, and a hint that if there is flirting going on, it should happen somewhere far away. Russell says Dokoyon is jealous, and that is it. One more second, and there would have been a fight, not worse than yesterday, but Yu-1 steps between them in time because the lecture is already starting. A slight starts to get nervous, like how are the fourth years even going to react to some freshmen barging in the middle of a course, especially after missing a week? They will just think some talented juniors were added, and U1 simply opens the door. And then everything freezes. Everyone pauses because the atmosphere in the classroom is so heavy that even Dokoyan, who usually ignores everything and everyone, feels that there are monsters sitting here. But something else hits U1. He looks at Zenon and realizes he has heard that voice before. The puzzle starts coming together. Meanwhile, Zenon begins the lecture with the basics, but the basics there are the kind that melt your brain. The tower is not just a structure without beginning or end, but basically a living organism that also thinks. And all those rewards that climbers supposedly find, surprised they do not find them, the tower prepared them in advance, and carefully gives them to those it considers worthy, like natural selection but with artifacts and magic. It searches for those who strive to understand themselves and reveals secrets only to those who are actually able to handle them. But this perfectly tuned system went to hell because of some intruder who turned everything upside down. A living tower that chooses people itself already sounds like something too intelligent. And then a detail comes up. The rector sent a letter right after someone from outside got inside, which means that Spider Hell could very well have been his doing. But if you think about it, the weirdness did not start there. The difficulty was insane from the very first rooms. And then it clicks for U1. What if the problem is not the intruder at all? What if the tower started making everything harder not because someone broke in, but because they started climbing? Maybe all those trials were not random, but a deliberate decision of the tower that threw them there itself. Or an even crazier option. Everything is happening because U1, as the descendant of the tower owner, started his ascent. And at that moment realization hits him. He is clearly shaken and everyone notices it, including Zenon, who is watching him very closely. U1 decides not to overthink it too much because if he starts spinning all of this out, he might actually lose his mind. And in reality, their class is already living on hardcore difficulty, where every trial feels like it is from another dimension. But as they say, high risk means fat loot. So the rewards from the tower will probably not just be good but straight up insane. Still, he is not exactly on friendly terms with this whole mysterious concept yet. Meanwhile, Zenon drops another thought. There is a barrier around them that some students do not notice for years. But Yuan and Rushel have their intuition on point, leveled up properly, so as expected, they pass the filter of this lecture. And then a purple sphere appears out of thin air like a boss fight is about to start. Zenon immediately asks Yuan what he sees, and he honestly does not see a single thing. The professor does not back off, tells him to focus harder, and Yuan starts digging into it, trying to pull out anything at all. In the end, he manages to grasp three things: barrier, rupture, and protection, but at the same time he feels that he cannot absorb it. Zenon lets him relax, but in fact this is already a small victory. The guy immediately broke down three key aspects, and now it becomes clear why the rector is watching him so closely. But Yuan, without any extra drama, still does not understand what it actually is. And then Zenon goes philosophical, saying it is important not to find the answer right away, but to never stop thinking, to level up imagination, because thinking here is the main skill. If you have enough cognitive power, you will be able to control this sphere, and if one day you understand how things are built, learn to analyze them and think on a large scale, this thing could basically turn you into something like a pseudo-god. U1 brain freezes, but Zenon hints that he will get it with time. That is where the lecture ends, and the homework is simply to imagine where this could be applied. U1 starts wondering what a pseudo-god even is, like almost a god, or just a fake version of one. The course feels like survival of the smartest. He tries to get an explanation from his friends, but they all have the same vibe of not understanding anything. And while they are processing all of this, Ortima appears in their path, standing there like he was waiting on purpose. And it is immediately clear this is not just a quick hello. He is looking for Dok Goyan. She walks up with a slight smile, thinking this is about to be something serious, maybe even a duel, even though that is not so easy in the academy. She is already mentally preparing. And then the guy suddenly drops to one knee, pulls out a bouquet, and calmly asks her out on a date. The group is completely stunned, and Dokoyan seems to be the most frozen out of all of them. After that whole scene, everyone went their separate ways, but the aftertaste remained because seriously, falling in love with a girl who regularly sends you into a half-dead state is some extreme-level masochism. Yuan was clearly on edge at that moment. All of this was getting on his nerves a little. Dokoyan, however, was not really bothered by the confession itself. She was more interested in what Ortima was actually planning, because the whole thing looked way too insincere. Yuan, of course, did not really agree with that because Dokoyan is insanely beautiful. She herself got a bit flustered from that kind of directness. He said it so calmly, like it was just a basic fact without any tension. He has that habit in general, giving out compliments like it is nothing. But Rushel still goes back to the idea that there was something more behind it. Dokoyan quickly shuts the topic down, saying she is not interested in that at all, and he can go look for attention somewhere else, and just leaves. And only Russell notices that for a second, a very real sadness flashed across Ortima's face after such a cold rejection. After that, everything returns to the usual routine. As soon as U1 uploads the new video of the week, another concept opens for him: charm and honor. Something in him has clearly changed, but how to use it in the tower is still a mystery. He even starts looking at himself and asks Russell if his face changed, and she, without really thinking, says that he looks charming, which makes U1 himself freeze for a moment. At that moment, Dakoyan brings everyone back to reality, either training or rest, without these in-between states where they are just messing around. After that, both pairs come together in sparring again, and it becomes obvious U1 really got a boost during this time, and a noticeable one. A slight suggests they should stop obsessing over dry stats and move forward, but Dakoyan still believes he is not yet at the level of a slight in Russell. And if we are honest, their joint training worked from the very beginning only because they both subconsciously held back against each other. Nevertheless, there is no more time to slowly warm up tomorrow. They enter the tower again. And the main question remains open. Did U1 figure out what to do with this beast? Because if not, they are heading for an exact repeat of the last catastrophe. During this week, he did not just train, he observed. Especially Rochelle. And he realized something: her heart literally works like an engine running on emotions. Any emotion becomes fuel, and which emotion it is completely determines her state. Negative, and she goes into overheating, loses control, becomes more and more dangerous even for herself. Positive or calm, and on the contrary, she stabilizes like someone turned the temperature down. The problem is that in battle, emotions always accelerate on their own, and that automatically pushes her into berserk mode. But U1 started changing the principle itself, not to suppress but to replace the fuel, and it actually worked. He did not just spend time with her for fun, he literally collected fragments of her real emotions: when she felt light, when she laughed, when she simply felt safe. Not fake, not forced, but real, like imprints of her essence. Joy, calm, laughter. He carefully collected all of this, and now he uses it. And at the right moment, squeezing these three concepts as a single tool, he rushes toward Russell, confident that this time it has to work. Russell was supposed to calmly absorb the prepared emotions and stabilize, but reality decided to run its own script. She just brushed it off like it had nothing to do with her, and the next second she already launched forward, slammed into U1 and drove him into the ground like she wanted to end the fight right there. The situation instantly went out of control, so Dokoyan and a slight rushed in to save him without a word. And then a sharp stop chains appear from both sides and lock Russell's arms hard. And she seems to come back to her senses even before she is fully restrained. On one hand, this is a good sign: the beast calms down faster than before. On the other hand, relying in battle on the fact that every time someone will chain her in time and she will not manage to tear someone apart already sounds like a very bad plan. It is obvious that there are changes, but no one fully understands what exactly they are yet. Russell herself is grateful now she can at least fight without the constant fear of losing control. But as soon as the atmosphere starts to soften a little, Dakoyan brings everyone back to reality. With her signature cold look, she walks closer, studies them carefully like she is trying to catch something but says nothing, and in the end just decides to end the training for today. Then the conversation moves to strategy. A slight suggests that this time they should take the sword into the tower, because now it is not just another run at stake, but basically the fate of all four of them. But the others decide it is better to first build a proper base, especially since this is only the second run in the first semester. The more often a slight uses his holy sword, the more dependent on it he becomes. And if you consider that there is a mix of demon concept with a holy spirit inside, it already starts to raise doubts. Is it really that holy at all? U1 says if there is even the slightest negative effect from the weapon, it is better to keep it at a distance. But at the same time, he reminds them they are being watched. The videos are seen by millions. After that, he checks his stats, prepares Eva and Taiki, and the team gradually gathers for the next run. Russell, for her part, promises to hold on and do everything she can, focusing on U1. Dagoyan, however, is skeptical. She hopes Russell will at least last until Saturday evening, but she also has a separate conversation with U1. Today is the first evaluation, and honestly, she is disappointed in two members of the team, clearly not the level she expected. And U1 himself took responsibility for the result if everything goes wrong. He, however, sticks to his position. The changes have already started. They are just not instant. And then another moment comes up that Dakoyan did not finish talking about yesterday, but before that she lightly punishes Rochelle for trying to eavesdrop. And then she gives a rather harsh observation: some people are more comfortable in a clear, rigid system where there is strong leadership. And apparently Rochelle is exactly that type. On some level, she really needs someone who can fully take control. And that is what leads to the main conclusion: when the beast inside loses control, no soft talks work anymore. U1 was completely confused while Dakoyan just waved it off and briefly told him to remember it for the future. Everyone was ready and the team finally entered the tower. The second expedition of the special selection freshmen of Class 11 began, and it immediately became clear that everything here would be completely different from the previous training runs. They found themselves in a strange room where it felt like reality itself was playing along with illusions. Not a single wall, not a single corridor looked real. Dokwaeon expected they would start from the first room, but in reality it all looked like a giant labyrinth, and judging by the number on the pendant they were already on the 5th floor. Russell, who was sensitive to the slightest changes, immediately sensed the presence of something. There was a strange crackling sound, distortion of space, and vague outlines flickered before their eyes. Russell immediately rushed to attack. Yu-Won activated the all-seeing gaze and instantly understood this was a glitch phenomenon. When the signal breaks, the image and sound distort and the inversion of form creates an effect of real horror. The monster was completely unusual and there were so many concepts around it that it made his head spin. Yu-Won wanted to collect the inversion, but Dokwaeon firmly forbade him to get distracted. Clearing these glitches in the labyrinth promised to be a real trial. He slowly began to accumulate inversion while controlling Russell so she would not enter a berserk state, but stayed near and helped without rushing into battle alone. Dokwaeon strictly made it clear that flirting and getting distracted was definitely not the time, and they continued moving. Yu-Won decided not to try to absorb concepts from the walls of the labyrinth, focusing on the glitches instead, and it worked. The labyrinth itself was surprising. Even though he remembered every route, it felt like they had already been here, even though the shape of the passages kept changing. Reality kept throwing constant changes at them, and the only rational solution at the moment seemed to be the complete destruction of the labyrinth. Yu-Won got so carried away collecting inversion that he missed something important and asked Dokwaeon to stop for a moment. His attention focused on the walls, and he realized the constantly changing path was not just chaos but a cleverly hidden mechanism. Pressing one of the blocks, he activated a hidden passage and a completely new route opened before them, promising further trials and surprises. Yu-Won noticed it a bit earlier, but he was so absorbed in collecting concepts that he simply did not pay attention. He told the others that he had been watching the space for a couple of hours, and came across a section that seemed strange and wrong to him, and Dokwaeon barely hid her surprise. Even she missed that vulnerability. It was no surprise that Yu-Won was not just a genius but someone special. As soon as they stepped into the opened passage, an elite monster greeted them. The hero dealt with it, absorbed the stats, but his magic power remained at the same level despite 3 hours of intensive concept gathering. It did not exceed 200. Dokwaeon asked what happened, and Yu-Won explained everything in detail, and the girl only smiled. The hero hit a wall, literally draining energy from everything around him, but continued without pauses, not giving himself time to recover, and quickly reached the limit. Trying to surpass the limit blindly by hunting monsters was clearly not the best idea. Seeing Russell look, Dokwaeon could not resist showing off a little, and Yu-Won already started asking her to teach him and even thought about taking her to the city. The idea was simple. The best thing he could do now was to study the basics of the divine martial art Hyunsingon. The technique was basic but fundamental, and in fact all mastery is built on it. Surprisingly, even children study this art, and it was strictly passed down by inheritance. If Dokwaeon's father found out that she was teaching someone like Yu-Won, the shock would be guaranteed. Yu-Won shyly asked if he should undress for training because Dokwaeon was passing a secret art to this ignorant and reckless person from another world. She would never admit that she was sharing a secret until he became her husband. She ordered him to sit properly and calm his mind, and she herself felt a strange feeling as if she wanted to raise this person with her own hands. Yu-Won stood out among everyone she had ever seen. His talent in martial arts was obvious, but what impressed the most was the potential. It was interesting how fast and how far he could go, and at the same time Dokwaeon did not want anyone else to influence his path. Yu-Won thought that before starting there should be some kind of mantra, but Dokwaeon just laughed, explaining in words would take too long. It was easier to implant the technique directly into the body. She was hooked by his knowledge about the initiation ceremony, although she understood that if he admitted that he learned it from novels, she would simply get beaten. And without any warning, Dokwaeon started the training, and Yu-Won immediately felt a strange, unfamiliar state that completely took over him. The divine manifestation technique completely overturned Yu-Won's understanding of chi mana and the body. Mana altered by this technique literally stimulated the body, and the body constantly consumed magical power to create pure chi. Simply put, it was a filter of magic that turned it into a more perfect life energy. At the moment when Dokwaeon touched Yu-Won, it felt like a fireball pierced inside him. Mana literally devoured the space within, carving new paths that did not exist before. Dokwaeon gently calmed him, explaining that burning a path inside the body, moving divine chi again and again, was the essence of the technique. Yu-Won felt the blue flame inside him begin to circulate. His body seemed to wake up, and using mana directly no longer felt like the only option. He mastered the concept of the divine manifestation art. The concepts in his body were replaced by divine chi, and the more he trained, the clearer he felt the growth of all the forces inside. Yu-Won was thrilled and even hinted to Dokwayon about a gift, but she only advised him to wipe off the sweat if he did not want to conquer the tower alone. With every focus during training, he felt a brighter circulation of chi, his body grew stronger, his senses sharpened, and each training session turned into a real explosion of inner energy. Such a powerful art was passed to him almost just like that, and Yu-Won of course was not going to upload this to the channel. It was too personal. After training, he suggested getting something to eat, but Dokwayon insisted they move on. Staying too long on the 5th floor no longer made sense. They approached huge gates leading to the 6th floor, and Yu-Won suddenly stopped right behind the door. There were barely noticeable traces of someone else concept. Around the corner there was nothing, but his eyes saw a dense illusion hiding a passage. He reached out his hand, focused his power, and the door shattered into small fragments, revealing a staircase leading up. Obviously it was a short and carefully hidden path. Yu-Won absorbed a whole 50 illusions and then shyly asked what to do next. Even though everyone else already understood without words, there was only one option: to push forward. The room was totally messing with them on its own, like it was shifting as they climbed. Even though nothing actually moved, maybe the staircase itself was the real shift. They suddenly landed in the 8th room, skipping 3 at once, and the guidebook had warned, shortcuts are awesome, but the more you skip, the crazier and deadlier what's ahead. A slight looked off today, grumbling non-stop like he forgot his sword. Wasn't some magic wand relying on it way too much? Finally the exit popped up and the student ID didn't lie. Beyond this door was the 9th room. Russell instantly caught that familiar hostility, like past encounters were waiting behind the wall. And Dokwayon told Uslight to keep his sword ready so he wouldn't slack. The guy jumped with excitement, yelling, "It's all on me now." But the moment they stepped in, the vibe flipped. No monsters, ceilings huge, the atmosphere weirdly tense, and then a blast of light exploded across the room like someone cranked Photoshop to max. Yu-Won instantly seized control, pointed at Uslight, told him to hide behind a column, and the sniper lurking in the shadows clearly didn't get how he was spotted. His stealth supposed to be untouchable. The plan was simple: bait the hero, then blow the squad. But then a magical bomb intervened, nasty and brutal, and Yu-Won ordered everyone back a step. Luckily the bomb slipped and didn't detonate, leaving the sniper with eyes popping out, seeing for the first time his cunning was useless. This dude seriously underestimated the hero. He was gearing up for the next shot, but when that bomb hit right in front of him, everything went off script. Uslight wasted zero time reminding everyone, "You don't get distracted in a fight," and swung his godly sword so hard the sniper instantly regretted ever stepping in their way. Uslight did not waste time. He slammed the archer with a brutal hit to the shoulder, pinned him against the wall, and started shaking answers out of him, asking why the hell he decided to play sniper, and how he even slipped in here, because if Yu-Won could break through his stealth with just a look, then the whole bomb and the bullet trick was not some genius move. And the archer himself turned out to be a typical cocky trickster who overestimated his own skills and now had to pay for it. He started freaking out, saying rookies on the lower floors cannot pull stuff like this, but Dokwayon shut him up real quick with another hit, and coldly decided that before any talking it would be better to turn him into a safe version of a human without working limbs so he would not pull any last-second surprises. And Rushel did not even see the point in dragging it out and went in to finish him off, if not for Yu-Won chains stopping her mid-dash at the very last second. And then, like straight out of a classic scene, a voice echoed through the air from nowhere, and Dokwayon instantly knew it was a constellation. According to it, the archer had already screwed everything up, so at least he should die in style and be useful by taking a share of his teammates with him. And the guy still tried to prove he could finish what he started, but the rules had already changed, and for the desired outcome, a sacrifice was required. His body suddenly filled with a strange red and green light, and a second later everything exploded so hard that Yu-Won was almost caught right in the center of that hellish firework. At that exact moment he realized he could not dodge in time and did the only thing he could. He used the concept of the magical bomb he once absorbed, literally stopping an explosion with another explosion, and if he had been even a fraction of a second slower they would have been wiped off the map. Meanwhile, that so-called hero archer expected to be thrown back to the start of the tower, but the voice calmly stated that he was already dead. The tower counted his death right in the middle of the fight, and in reality, Yu-Won was the one who caused his end, and at the same time the voice sounded dissatisfied, saying they sacrificed a valuable piece and got nothing out of it, and hinted that they should have been more careful when the tower started showing special interest in this group. Yu-Won demanded answers, asking who the hell they were and what was going on, but got only one reply. They call themselves the Exodus, and they are enemies, after which the energy vanished like nothing ever happened. Dokwayon noted that constellations like that never act the same way, and that the Exodus is a legendary band of interdimensional pirates, and judging by everything this was their sponsor, and in any case a clash with them was inevitable sooner or later, so what happened might even work in their favor. Although the fact that the tower was showing special attention to their team felt a bit unsettling, A slight as usual started complaining that they always get hit the hardest, but then all of them were suddenly interrupted by a system notification, and it was not a message from the rector Dokwayon. A slight and Rushel all received a level up at the same time for the first time since enrollment. Looks like the tower decided to drop a bonus for the fact that the crew somehow pulled off a miracle and pushed back a constellation interference. And honestly, it made sense. Dogoyana Slight and Rushel were already above average in stats, like they had been stuck at a ceiling for a long time and finally broke through it. But U1 got completely skipped, like the system just pretended he did not exist. But he is not the kind of guy who buys into the whole got nothing narrative, because no window does not mean no reward. He activated his all-seeing eye, looked at the spot where that poor guy had just evaporated, and noticed a weird sphere left behind. And did not hesitate, he absorbed it, and instantly got a massive boost. His vitality shot up to 79, and on top of that he gained new concepts metamorphosis, which sounded insanely useful for transformations, and Starscar, clearly tied to those mysterious constellations, though how to actually use it was still a total mystery. Without wasting time, he fed metamorphosis to Eva, and that is when things got weird. Everyone saw U1 literally freeze for a second because Eva suddenly turned into an egg. And yeah, it had happened before, but back then it was quick, and now there was just silence, no hatching, nothing. Like the system hit pause, and it became clear this was probably a second stage of evolution, just way longer, which meant the team temporarily lost their main way to keep Rochelle in check, which honestly sounded like bad news. Luckily, the next floor turned out to be a rest zone, that famous 10th floor everyone kept talking about, and this time they actually got lucky. Instead of emptiness, they found trees with fruits of Eden that not only removed fatigue but boosted abilities. U1 took a bite and straight up froze from the taste because it was on the PA level of the best thing you could ever eat in your life, but the hype died fast when he realized you cannot take them with you, and the effect only works once, and that is it. Still, the bonus was huge. After eating the fruit of knowledge, his all-seeing eye upgraded, and could now distinguish sins, though by what criteria was still a tower-level mystery. While he was processing all that, Rushel found a chest, and now things got interesting, because considering the hell they went through compared to others, there had to be something good inside in rest zones. These chests are basically endgame loot for everything you survived, and their quality depends on the material from wood to gold. This one was wooden, but with golden fittings, which already hinted at something interesting. Dokoyan decided not to risk it and told U1 to open it because a slight could accidentally curse the loot with his luck, and when he and Rushel finally opened the chest, they both just froze because inside was the most unexpected thing possible. A pink wand with a glowing heart-shaped tip. That thing was straight up radiating power, so there was no doubt they were looking at a real artifact, even if it looked ridiculously unserious, like it got pulled straight out of some magical girl anime, and U1 instantly realized it was definitely from his world. Everything about it was tied to magic. The soul stat was pushing almost 200, which was no joke anymore. And by the feel of it, this was not just a wand, but something like a training tool for beginners with some kind of built-in ego to pass knowledge to its owner. U1 did not hesitate and decided to take it for himself openly, saying he would pay for it, but the team did not even argue. Everyone agreed that after everything they had been through, he deserved this loot, and even he felt that this artifact would save him more than once. And then out of nowhere, he asks a slight to gather a whole bowl of fruits, even though everyone knew they would just vanish the moment they left the room. But U1 clearly wanted to test a weird idea. What if, instead of taking them out directly, he merged them with something else? The girls immediately caught on what he was getting at: that legendary mega tasty jam. If each fruit counts separately and disappears when you try to take it out, then what happens if you fuse it with another item and create something new? The logic was shaky, but it sounded like a plan. And in the end, U1 ended up holding a completely new item, an elixir of life with a bunch of unknown effects, but with a small catch in the form of divine punishment for greed if you overdo it. He could not use it right away because of the room rules, but the very fact already sounded like a cheat code. Doc Goyan, not wanting to lose momentum, suggested moving on, even though the others were clearly stuck thinking about the sweet loot. And just like that, the team entered the 11th room, and the best part was the plan worked. The elixir was safely sitting in U1 inventory. Doc Goyan even jumped in to hug him out of excitement, but almost instantly pulled back, like she remembered she was supposed to be a strict leader. And then their attention snapped to new sounds. Shell beasts showed up, basically armored tanks of this place. She was even a bit disappointed she did not get to try the elixir because she was already full, but quickly found a silver lining. Now they could burn off that appetite on these monsters. After that, it was pure action. The team went at it with greedy intensity, taking down one creature after another like they were farming experience at max efficiency. And after 10 hours, they had already reached the 14th room, but there was just one problem: the hunger never came. Apparently, they were the only team that cleared 3 rooms in a row, not for survival or loot, but just to finally get hungry. In the end, everyone was exhausted and decided to take a break before they dropped from fatigue, even though Doc Goyan was against it. But then Yuan simply nodded toward Mond. Rushel, and everything became clear without words. She was on the edge of losing control, and pushing forward in that state was not bravery. It was straight up suicide. In that state, Rushel could snap at literally any second, so the team decided not to play heroes and just get themselves together and rest for today and move on from the 15th floor tomorrow. And when it came to cleaning up, Yuan of course did not go small. He straight up set up a full shower and while at it decided to train his manifestation technique, which for Da Goyan turned out to be almost fun because teaching him was easy and smooth. Without overthinking it, she dragged Rushel along to wash up, and Yuan in his usual style casually told a slight to join them, which made him instantly flare up, get flustered and protest, saying a guy is not supposed to go into the shower with girls, even though it felt like he still had not realized his secret was not a secret anymore. In the end he stayed but turned it into a whole drama about not being able to undress around others, demanded Yu-Won turn away, and while Yu-Won was supposedly not looking, he still noticed a strange necklace on his neck. The next day Dokoyun decided to put some pressure on a slight and told him not to rely on his sword for now since he had gotten better in fights, but he straight up refused. Without the holy sword he felt useless, especially with the unknown ahead and enemies no longer being the kind you could relax against, so she eventually gave in and allowed him to use it again, and the guy almost lifted off the ground from happiness. Meanwhile, Rushel was somehow in a bad mood even though she had just eaten, and it clearly was not about food but about how close Yuan and Dokoyan were getting, which already hinted at future problems inside the team. The moment they stepped into the 15th room, they were greeted by massive orcs throwing spears, and it became obvious that without his sword, a slight would have been in serious trouble. The second Yuan got distracted, a huge orc was already looming over him, but Dokoyan shoved him aside just in time, and Rushel instantly dashed in to finish the enemy, getting closer and closer to her berserk state. Eva still showed no signs of waking up, and Yu-Won understood that sooner or later he would have to try that risky move again, the one that failed before. At that moment, one of the orcs mockingly pointed out that Yu-Won looked like the weakest, clearly expecting easy prey, but he did not get to enjoy it as Slight suddenly stepped in and with brutal force cut his head clean off, making it clear that he was no longer the same whining and insecure guy he used to be. As Slight had apparently already taken out the most dangerous opponent and decided that everything else was just a warm-up, so without a beast second thought he dove straight into the crowd of orcs, ignoring the team yelling at him to stop, and for him it was almost personal. He did not expect to run into orcs in the tower that looked so much like the ones from his home world, but quickly convinced himself that it did not matter. Orcs are orcs, and no savage race could withstand the radiance of his holy sword. From the outside, it no longer looked like a fight, but a chaotic slaughter, and Dokoyan could not take it anymore. She started yelling at him for swinging his blade with zero coordination, even though they agreed to regroup first, and Firikugul then move because the shift could start at any moment, but a Slight riding the high just scoffed and acted like he was the raid boss here, hinting that with him and his sword the next floor would be easy mode, and maybe the others were just mad they got nothing. That already sounded insanely arrogant and completely out of character, and Dokoyan was one step away from blowing up while Yu-Won was trying to at least prepare for the shift but did not make it in time. The space itself started breaking apart right before their eyes, and in the next second everything turned into a giant chessboard like a pour. They were not transported, but reality itself got rewritten. At that moment, Rochelle suddenly collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, grabbed onto Yu-Won and showed she was holding on by the last thread. She was on the verge of losing control, and it became painfully clear how critical that rest had been. And then Captain Kuros appeared, the very same leader of the orcs from the 15th room, even though Yu-Won was already sure they were supposed to be on the 16th, but it looked like the floors had just merged into one. By the rules of this new room, the weakest had to go first, and the choice fell on Yu-Won, but a Slight immediately stepped in, deciding that no rules applied to him, and that some orc had no right to dictate terms to someone who wielded holy radiance. He dashed forward, intending to end it all in one strike. But the tower quickly reminded who was in charge the moment he broke the rules. A penalty hit, his skills were shut down, and a Slight froze in place like he got switched off mid-game. Kuros did not even bother trying with a single swing of his machete. He struck a Slight and the guy just vanished like he was erased from reality, leaving behind nothing but silence and that heavy feeling that something went very wrong. And it became clear this was not a normal room, but that so-called deception room where the rules are absolute, play by them, and you pass with a massive reward, break them, and you are out, no discussion. And that is when it hit everyone, they screwed up badly. A Slight was out of the tower, which meant the team was no longer complete, but the difficulty did not drop because the tower locks it based on the highest group strength at entry. And after that it does not care how many are left, even if you are alone, you are still playing for the whole squad. That meant only one thing: because of one overconfident move, the entire expedition went straight off a cliff, and Yu-Won had a flood of thoughts running through his head that no filter could handle, while Kuros in the meantime grew twice as big, like he got a bonus from their mistake. Dokoyan quickly put the pieces together. She had suspected before that the holy sword was messing with a Slight mind, but did not think it went this far because he had never been this reckless, and it looked like the restriction on using the sword backfired. Like it snapped something inside him, and now it was obvious this weapon could not be trusted. In a critical moment, it could ruin everything again. She was already planning a hell-level training for him if they even made it out alive. But right now they had to deal with the situation here and now. Playing fair made no sense anymore, and Dako Yun suggested going all in, breaking the rules and seeing how high the reward actually goes. Without wasting time, she dashed in first, leaving Yu-Won to deal with Rochelle, reminding him of his responsibility from before entering the tower. And it all followed the same pattern. Attack penalty, and she disappeared too, but not before cutting off Kuro's arm, leaving him stronger but clearly not in perfect condition for the fight. Now everything fell on Yu-Won's shoulders. For the two who were already out, he had to finish this and move forward. The orc, of course, assumed the weakest was up next, and he could just clean up what was left. But then the situation flipped instantly. Rushel suddenly growled, her claws came out, and she looked like she was not just about to fight, but about to tear everything apart, crossing the final line of control. Yu-Won was holding Rushel back with everything he had, literally gripping onto her, trying to stop her, because he understood that if they snapped right now and broke the rules, they would never find out what all of this risk was even for. But she was no longer hearing him, so he went for the last option. He had left, sending a stream of positive emotions along her mental path. That same move that failed before, but now there was no choice. And a soft green light spread through the room, creating a sense of calm that shattered instantly when Rushel suddenly clutched her chest and started choking, coughing like it only made things worse. Meanwhile, Kuros kept raising the pressure, the atmosphere turning heavy, almost crushing, and at some point he just lost patience and hurled a spear straight at them. Yu-Won tried to reach Rushel again, but she only pushed him away and stepped in front of him, shielding him with her own body. Kuros decided to end it in one strike. But even in that state, acting almost purely on instinct, Rushel kept protecting Yu-Won, taking the hit on herself, her arm absorbing the full impact. And even the orc noted that Yu-Won was insanely lucky to have a partner like that. Only a second later, Rushel literally tore his head off with her bare hands. Yu-Won survived even though he still got clipped, and immediately tried to snap her out of it, calling out, telling her to drink the elixir and recover before the next phase started. But there was nothing in response. She did not react, and then suddenly growled and shoved him away. And it became clear that his attempt with emotions did not just fail, he only fueled that inner furnace even more. And as if that was not enough, at that exact moment, a new shift began. Monsters from the 17th room appeared, disguised goblins, and Rushel without hesitation rushed straight into their crowd like a predator into a pack of prey. Yu-Won for the first time truly felt a cold emptiness inside. He was wrong, he did not understand why, but he could not stop her anymore. And after everything that happened, his own words about being someone others could rely on sounded like a joke. He had been acting blindly, overestimating himself, thinking he could control the situation and manage Rushel however he wanted. And maybe that was his biggest mistake. After a slight and Dakoyan took themselves out of the game, the expedition was already basically a failure. And at some point the idea even crossed his mind to just end it all here and go back to the start. Yu-Won froze for a second and stopped resisting, but even then Rushel did not stop. She kept fighting over and over again, shielding him and taking the hits, like her body was no longer moving by the will of her mind, but by some deeper, stubborn instinct to protect him at any cost. Somewhere deep inside, Rushel was still holding on to him, that part of her that believed he would handle it and tell her what to do, trusting him without question. And that was what Yu-Won grabbed onto when realizing the situation was crashing straight into the abyss. He downed the elixir in one go, admitting everything was falling apart. But he had no right to let it end like this. The problem was, it did not make things easier. Rushel still had to be brought back to normal, and he had no idea how to do that. Usually in this state, she was almost tame, dependent like a puppy, but what stood in front of him now was something else, a loyal but feral beast ready to tear itself apart for him, and then it clicked. A beast does not mean uncontrollable, especially if it was not born that way. Rushel definitely had a human core, which meant it was not about lack of understanding, but about his soft way of communicating simply not reaching her. Dokyuan words surfaced in his mind. If a beast stops hearing words, you do not try to speak gently, you speak its language. And Yu-Won instantly switched approach. Without warning, he shoved Rushel away from the last goblin, because if she killed it, they would be transferred immediately, and that was guaranteed death. So they needed to stop first, patch up, and catch their breath. He even kicked the remaining monster and roughly shut it up for a second. Rushel clearly had no intention of obeying, and so he went all in. He pulled out a chair with a rope and slammed it against the floor with a sharp sound, creating a harsh signal, then placed the chair and ordered her to sit, and somehow it worked. Rushel obeyed and froze like she had been switched off. Then he reinforced it, told her to stay quiet, and when she calmed down, he softened, took her hand, started praising her gently, patting her head, and right before his eyes, her hair began returning to its normal color, like the madness was fading along with it. Even Yu-Won clearly did not expect it to work this clean, but the important thing was Russell finally came back to her senses, though not for long. In the very next moment she jumped off the chair and rushed to him, clinging to him like he was the only anchor in the world. And in that gesture there was already something unsettling, not just trust but total submission. The concept had settled too deep. Russell was no longer just a teammate. She had become a being completely bound to Ban Yu-Won, and the whole situation was starting to look less like a victory and more like something outright insane. Yu-Won carefully laid Russell on the bed, and only after some time did she come back to her senses, and he had already given her a bit of the elixir, while the last goblin he had wisely tied to a chair. Feeling the weight of everything that had happened, Yu-Won quietly promised that he would do whatever it takes and apologized for not understanding her signals sooner. In response, Russell gently took his hand and pressed it to her face, sincerely thanking him, and once again called him her master. That word hit Yu-Won hard. It sounded almost absurd. They were the same age classmates, and if anyone from his family found out that a girl his age called him that, it would be a guaranteed family disaster. But for Russell, it was not just a word, it was something much deeper. She was born in a tribe descended from great ancestors. Her father made a contract with a constellation, something he later regretted but could no longer escape. That being had no intention of letting go of the bloodline of great beasts, and through him passed on to Russell a cursed blessing. That very furnace which burns emotions, turning them into power while at the same time binding the person to those same emotions. Since childhood she was almost uncontrollable, and to avoid harming others she had to suppress herself, hide her feelings, keep everything inside, and over time that made her withdrawn. That was why she always seemed so passive. Neither she nor her father wanted anything to do with that constellation, and Russell searched for a way to break free from that trap. And she found one: the bond of master and subordinate. For beastkin, it is a deep instinct. Submission to the command of a master can suppress the influence of the furnace. As long as there is someone she obeys, the emotions do not spiral out of control. But choosing a master is not simple. The soul of that person must be significantly higher in rank than her own. And considering that Russell was born with an already high soul level, she could not find such a person until she met Yu-Won. From the very moment she saw him, she felt a strange but clear certainty that she could serve him. And now she was glad she accepted him in time, even if it sounded heavy, because thanks to that she no longer had to constantly suppress herself. Now she could live differently, smile more, not be afraid to cry, act more boldly and freely, and all of that was because of him. Russell suggested that they continue together, climb as high as they could, just the two of them. And at that moment Yu-Won pulled out the wild energy he had accumulated. It was not much, but without hesitation he decided to give it to Russell. The energy was powerful and pure, and Yu-Won immediately passed it to her without holding anything back. And the moment she accepted it, the fear vanished. And Russell, as if reborn, was already craving the next battle. They rushed into the fight with wild energy, but after reaching the 19th floor they still lost. Outside, Yuminia immediately wanted to question Dokoyan and Aslight about what happened inside, but the moment they appeared they both instantly disappeared into the training hall. Yeah, rest in peace, Aslight. Clashes with violators are considered way more deadly than most anomalies, so she was genuinely relieved that everyone came back alive. Yu-Won was focused on something else: the intentions of that guy. According to Yumina, he clearly had the qualifications of an assassin, and it made perfect sense. Promising rookies like them started standing out way too early, which meant someone wanted to eliminate them as soon as possible. Refusing contracts with constellations shows willpower and potential that attracts way too much attention. Exodus is a notorious group of interdimensional pirates, and behind them stand constellations radical and ruthless. If people like Yu-Won and his team are not going to sign contracts with them, then their talent automatically becomes a threat that is easier to erase. The only reason they survived was because of their high base stats and strong detection abilities, but how many others died the same way? And the most disgusting part was that these very constellations interfering in human fate from the very beginning were the reason for Russell's suffering. Just thinking about it made Yu-Won feel sick to his core. He was not going to forgive that. Yumina, on the other hand, looked upset. She felt like she was not very useful in that situation. She suggested uploading a video of what happened. It could hold Exodus back for a while. Yu-Won kept getting more convinced that nothing good comes from dealing with constellations, and he would probably never agree to a contract. But Yumina still tried to change his mind, saying there are also those who genuinely care about their contractors. Either way, they would have to talk through what happened in the tower, especially since the tension inside the group had not gone anywhere. Doc Goyan, for example, had no intention of letting Aslight off easily. In her opinion, that worm was still far from redemption, and honestly, if not for his mistake, they might have already reached the 20th floor. What annoyed her the most was that he kept calling it just a mistake. Meanwhile, Aslight was already hiding wherever he could, just to avoid running into her. In the end, Dokoyan agreed to give him some freedom, but not for free. She demanded 2 gifts, one for the promise Yu-Won made to her in the tower, and another one right now. And just like that, in the city of flowers, Ranike, she was happily picking out clothes while the whole team, including Yu-1, helped her, or more like he was running the whole process. This kind of style was new for Dukoyun, but she clearly liked how he chose things. Maybe for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to just relax. Russell, watching all of this, suddenly snapped and sharply called her a greedy pig. She absolutely hated everything that was happening right now.